Mexico. And in between, there's this short, fun, very playful, hands-on monetary economy course delivered by David Saint-Onge. It's quite fun. I mean, when you do this, you realize that you can really enjoy learning about money, which is something we're not too used. What else? Yeah, I mean, looking at the title, of this episode, looking at circular economies and free cities, you may wonder how did you come up with this idea, Jacques? I mean, those terms, those notions are totally distinct. What does a free city has got to do with a circular economy? Why do you bundle those themes in this conversation? Well, the thing is, it's true, those are very distinct issues, but if you explore, if you dig the mind of a Bitcoiner, you'll quickly find that those two notions are very intimately intertwined. They combine in a dream, in a sort of obsession that Bitcoiners have. They keep dreaming about building citadels and Bitcoin circular economies. And the thing is, this dream is increasingly becoming true. So it makes sense to explore it. Why? Because the problem regarding this theme is that this is an obsession, largely shared within the community, and it's becoming sometimes a little bit of a hype. And it's like everyone and their dog are planning to build a Bitcoin circular economy, sometimes without properly knowing what those terms mean. What's the meaning of a free city? What does a citadel encompasses in terms of progress on which dimensions? Likewise, it's not always clear what is meant by Bitcoin circular economy. So if only to clarify those terms within the community of Bitcoiners, but yeah, I mean, there's this point, and there's also the need for us to better communicate what we're trying to achieve, so that we can better interact with people who do not yet know about Bitcoin and who do not yet realize what those free city experiments entail and the value of Bitcoin to foster a more circular economy. So that's the reason why we're having this conversation today. And we're going to start by defining and framing the terms, and we'll bring Maria Castillo from Mexico on stage. She's going to tell us about circular economy. Actually, I might introduce those panelists. Maria is Social and Environmental Impact Director and Assistant Professor at IESEG School of Management in Paris. Prior to that, she used to work as policy analyst at OECD and deputy director at the Ministry of Economy in Mexico. So Maria has got a very strong background on sustainable development, circular economy, ESG, etc. Maria, I'm not sure she managed to make it this evening. She's had some unfortunate and then we have Peter Young. Peter Young, I'm just going to bring him right now here. Peter is the managing director of the Free City Foundation. Prior to that, he spent much of his career in Beijing, supporting trade links between the UK and China. Welcome, Peter. How's it going?
Yeah, going very well, Jax. Thanks very much for inviting me to this discussion. I'm looking forward to doing some learning about circular economy and getting into some interesting discussions about free cities and its impact on Bitcoin.
And I tell you, I'm considering myself extremely fortunate that you're joining us today, because I can't think of so many people in such a good position as yours to tell us about these free cities, special economic zones, and their connection to citadels. So it's great to have you. And once we're done with this definition, this framing conversation, we'll bring on stage a couple of Bitcoiners, Scott Wolfie and Quentin Ehrenmann, who basically are going to give us an overview of what Bitcoiners are doing on the ground in terms of Bitcoin circular economies and building citadels. So just a short bio of Quentin Ehrenmann is actually, Quentin. Welcome, Quentin. How are you doing?
Hey, Jacques.
¿Cómo
Very
estás?
excited to be here. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're in Salvador at the moment, aren't you?
Right. Yeah.
Fantastic to see you. So Quentin is a Bitcoin educator and manages the international expansion at Mi Primer Bitcoin. Now, is in a very good position as such to observe the development of countless Bitcoin initiatives all around the world. So and the interesting thing is that Quentin, you yourself has strived to develop the Bitcoin circular economy in Piraya, a remote island of El Salvador. So you have this first-hand experience of what it is to attempt to promote Bitcoin adoption in a community. So welcome, Quentin. We're super happy to have you on board today.
Thank you.
And then finally, so we start with the framing conversation, then we have an overview of what Bitcoiners are doing on the ground, and then we engage a dialogue. Basically, we're gonna have most of the panelists joining this conversation, plus an additional panelist, Ronnie. Ronnie is, I'll bring him in at the moment. Is he with us at the moment? Oh, I forgot to send him the latest, because I've had to change the stream. Just bear with me a second. He's on Noster only, so I need to send him the new link. Right. So I'll just introduce him as he comes. Yeah, I mean, the dialogue, basically, it's about figuring out together the extent to which those experiments, those initiatives, those projects developed by Bitcoiners, to what extent do they actually embrace the vision between the vision behind the free cities? To what extent do they actually contribute to a more circular economy the way it's classically understood by most people? Yeah. So Ronnie is not here yet. I hope he's going to be joining soon. Just a few words on him. I think it's going to be very interesting to hear his insight as part of this dialogue, because he's a tech consultant, he's a developer, and he's quite senior. He's done plenty of things in his life. But what really caught my attention is that he's currently involved in the Prospera Special Economic Zone Builder Network, and in a similar team, of developer involved in another Special Economic Zone project. So it's coming from a very technical background, although is very much a philosopher and a very wise person. And I think he will be in a unique position to share his view on how technology is really opening new horizons for humanity, how it can allow the individuals to express more of their singularity and creativity. So that's about it for the plan for this thematic conversation. And I suggest we start with this definition and framing. Yeah, Ronnie has just arrived. Ronnie, sorry about that. I've just introduced you to the audience, so we'll catch up with you in a few minutes. Now we're going to be listening to Peter, right? Peter, welcome on stage. I think you can share your presentation, can't you?
Yeah, sure. So just to confirm, we don't have Maria. She's going to be presenting later. Is that right?
Yeah, she's not here yet. But in case she doesn't make it once you've finished, she's already circulated. She's already sent me a video that does the job very well.
Okay, so I need to share my screen then.
Yeah, so I mean, the whole idea is for you to shed light upon these nations of free cities, special economic zones. I guess it has to do with some sort of experiment with alternative governance. And it's great if you can sort of define the few dimensions that are used to characterize these initiatives, and understand in which context those free cities, special economic zone have emerged in the past few decades, right?
That's right. Yeah, can you
So,
see my screen
okay,
now?
that's it. So now, yeah, that's it. So perhaps,
Can you see my screen there, Jax?
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I can see it.
Great. Okay. So I will kick off then. So Jack has asked me to introduce one of the key concepts of today's session, which is the free city. So the reason why free cities have become a topic of interest to Bitcoiners is that many of us live in countries that are starting to place restrictions on the use of Bitcoin as an alternative to conventional currency. So there's therefore naturally an interest amongst Bitcoin users in relocating to places where we know the use of Bitcoin will be protected and supported. Free cities are a new kind of jurisdiction that stands to provide that protection and support. And for that reason, they could very well end up becoming important to cultivating the Bitcoin circular economies that we are going to explore in this session. So in this presentation, I'm going to briefly explain what a free city is and why the concept can help us explore new ways of governing society. I'm then going to explain how free cities developed from a more established concept, which is the special economic zone. And finally, I'm going to give an example of an aspiring free city in Honduras called Prospera, which will help us to illustrate how this free cities concept is working in practice. So let me start then with a definition of a free city. Free cities are self-governing territories that uphold individual rights and freedoms. So the first element of that definition is that they're special zones within countries that are able to govern themselves relatively independently. This typically happens because there's some kind of agreement with a host government that grants the zone autonomy. The autonomy free cities have might allow them to set their own laws, establish their own regulations, manage their own public services, and issue their own residence permits. The second element of the definition relates to upholding individual rights. So, as well as being autonomous, free cities are places that also have a strong emphasis on allowing individuals to exercise their voluntary choices without being subject to excessive regulations or excessive taxation. So the second part of that definition implies that free cities are relatively libertarian in their nature. The governments there, therefore, will generally play a much less hands-on role in the everyday lives of citizens than you might experience in a traditional nation state. What the governments of free cities do instead is provide a strong legal framework that supports free and voluntary cooperation between members of their community. One of the reasons why our organization supports the idea of developing free cities is because we believe the world needs more innovation in governance. Establishing new autonomous free cities gives an opportunity for us to try out new approaches to governance in the 21st century. By doing that first at the city level, we also avoid some of the risks that come when you try to reform an entire country wholesale. Now, you might be wondering why free cities are necessary to try out new governance models, given that there are already around 200 countries in the world that are presumably doing this already. But the reality is that we're actually not seeing as much innovation as you might think. When you really drill down to the way that governments function, you find that there's a remarkable level of similarity in the core tools that they use. Let me illustrate this with a few examples. Firstly, The way that the government of almost every existing country in the world funds itself is through a complicated system of taxes. Within conventional taxation systems, the amount of tax owed varies from person to person and business to business. And the business or person is responsible for calculating exactly how much they owe themselves. Furthermore, there's generally very little relationship between what people contribute in taxes and what they receive from the state in return. This is in stark contrast to what happens in the business sector, where you typically will pay a fixed and predetermined amount in exchange for a clearly defined product or service. Another area of commonality is public services. Most states tend to deliver a range of public services, such as infrastructure, healthcare, and education, through centralized bureaucratic mechanisms. These services are primarily funded through taxation, and there is generally a limited role for market mechanisms in their delivery. Thirdly, there's a lot of commonality in monetary systems. Most states operate a financial system where a state-controlled central bank issues an inflationary currency that has certain legal privileges. These include being the mandated medium through which all taxes have to be paid. At the moment, there's perhaps only one country which is diverging from this traditional model, which is El Salvador. There are also some important similarities in terms of administration of justice, how national governments set their own unique regulations, and how countries maintain security for their populations. So because free cities have the autonomy to make their own rules and regulations, they can potentially serve as test beds for trying out new approaches to governance in some of these core areas. So if this sounds interesting to you, you might be wondering whether the idea of building free cities is actually realistic. Are countries really going to be willing to grant autonomy to certain regions so that they can set their own laws and regulations? Well, I would argue that it is actually realistic to expect this. And the reason for that is that there are already many examples of countries that grant autonomy to regions by setting up something called special economic zones. So now we come to our next definition. A special economic zone is a general term for a bounded area within a country that has different rules and regulations from the rest of the country in which it's based. These differences might impact areas such as tariffs and taxation, business regulations, labor law, and government procedures. These zones are primarily used by countries as a means of stimulating growth, attracting foreign investment, and creating high-quality jobs. The story of special economic zones is not particularly well understood, but there are actually more than 7,000 of these zones across the globe. Their growth in number has quietly been taking place across the world over the past half century. You can see that growth plotted on a graph behind me. In the mid-1970s, there were less than 100 of these zones worldwide, but today the number stands at more than 7,000. It's actually surpassed the top number featured on that chart. When we look at a map of the world, we can see that these zones are very numerous and distributed across 6 continents. So how did special economic zones come about? Well, the story of modern special economic zones started in Shannon Island in 1959. At the time, the Irish government was looking for a way to revive an airport that was declining in international traffic. What they decided to do was offer special tax exemptions to companies that chose to locate there. If someone listening is someone that enjoys duty-free shopping when they travel internationally, then they have Shannon to thank, because this place was the first site in the world to establish a duty-free shop. The zone was pretty successful, and it went on to inspire other zones that ended up becoming much more comprehensive in their scope. An example of that is Shenzhen in China. This is probably the most famous example of a subsequent special economic zone, and it was established in 1979, so 2 decades after Shannon. The Chinese government offered Shenzhen the freedom to experiment with different practices that were prohibited in the rest of the country at the time. This included allowing foreign companies to make direct investments in China, allowing people to buy and sell land, allowing Chinese people to set up their own private business, and relaxing the hukou system that limited internal migration for Chinese citizens. It served as a place where China, which at the time was a highly centralized socialist economy, could experiment with market reforms. As you can see in the pictures shown behind me, the reforms had a dramatic effect on Shenzhen's urban landscape. The city's economic growth averaged 20% per year between 1980 and 2020, and the policies adopted there ended up being copied across the whole of China. Another place that's made extensive use of special economic zones is Dubai. The Emirate has more than 30 of them in total. The first to be set up was Jebel Ali Free Zone in 1985, which remains one of the largest special economic zones in the world today. Another is Dubai International Financial Centre, which was set up in 2004, and it's notable for being one of the first special economic zones to have its own independent legal system. You can see pictures of Dubai in 1980 and 2020 behind me. Special economic zones played a huge role in transforming Dubai into the vibrant global city we all know it as today. So to sum up, there have already been very many special economic zones that have been established around the world. Some of those zones have been very successful and gone on to have a broad impact on the countries in which they're based. Given this, I think it's not unreasonable to assume that forward-thinking governments will be willing to experiment with new kinds of zone that push the boundaries of zone autonomy. In fact, this is already starting to happen in places like Prospera in Honduras that I'm now going to introduce. The picture behind me shows a building in Prospera, a next generation special economic zone and aspiring free city being built in Honduras. Prospera spans 1,000 acres on the tropical island of Roatan and the coastal city of La Ceiba. Its goal is to foster economic growth and create high quality jobs, while also serving as a hub for innovative business. You can see some of the businesses that operate there pictured in the film that's showing on the screen. Despite only being established in 2018, Prospera has already attracted 1,400 e-residents that make use of governance services. And in addition to that, there are 120 full-time residents that live within the physical bounds of Prospera. Furthermore, the development is home to 170 registered businesses, which are engaged in industries ranging from smart manufacturing and drone technology to gene therapy and architecture and design. One of the reasons Prospera has been able to attract these businesses is because of the innovative governance model that it offers. As an aspiring free city, Prospera is trying out new approaches to governance in some of those core areas that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Here are some examples. Firstly, Prospera is innovating in the way it funds itself by introducing membership fees. While it's not eliminated taxes completely, it's introduced a hybrid funding model. Taxes that the territory levies on residents are low and simple. You have a 5% individual income tax, 2.5% retail tax, 1% corporate tax, and 1% land tax. These low taxes are made possible because Prospera charges a fixed annual membership fee for people to be part of the community and use Prospera's governance services. The fee is $1,300 a year for foreigners and $280 for Hondurans. We can therefore see that this kind of hybrid funding model is starting to move away from that complicated conventional system that brings a lot of uncertainty to most taxpayers across the world. Another innovation relates to public services. Prospera is actually governed by a private operating company that has shareholders and therefore also a profit motive. This means that if Prospera isn't serving its residents well, then its shareholders lose money. This creates a different kind of incentive structure whereby Prospera is encouraged to deliver public services like infrastructure and security in a cost-effective way that meets the real needs of their citizens. A third example of where Prospera is innovating is in the use of currencies. It's possible to make use of multiple currencies within Prospera, and no special privilege is given to any individual currency. You can choose to operate your business using the Honduran lempira, the US dollar, any other national currency, or even Bitcoin if you choose. Prospera was the first jurisdiction in the world to make Bitcoin the equivalent of legal tender, which it did a few months before El Salvador. Prospera recently also became the first place in the world to allow businesses to use Bitcoin as a unit of account, meaning that they don't need to convert back to US dollars to calculate the taxes that they owe. There are also some very interesting innovations happening in the realm of the legal system, flexible regulations, and security systems, which I'm happy to go into in the discussion if that's of interest. So I hope this presentation has provided a helpful introduction to the concept of the free city, which we defined as a self-governing territory that upholds individual rights and freedoms. I hope it also helped to help you understand how free cities have emerged historically from special economic zones. We define those zones as bounded areas of countries that have their own rules and regulations. And finally, I hope it was helpful to learn about Prospera so you can see how the ideas that the Free Cities Foundation advocates are actually being implemented in reality. I only had time today to introduce one of the aspiring free city projects, but if you want to learn about others, you can check out profiles on the 15 projects that are featured on that map behind me by visiting free-communities.org. So thanks very much for listening. I'm going to now hand back over to Jack.
What can I say, Peter? It's a wonderful, it's truly a wonderful, extremely rich presentation that you just delivered. I think the amount of information, the clarity, the structure, it's all super helpful to get really the framework we were looking for to start understanding what a citadel can be, what are the dimensions on which this sovereignty can express itself. I think we'll come back to it at a later stage, but it really you fulfill your mission in terms of defining those terms and providing a framework of understanding the historical context of the emergence of this project. It feels good to understand that, to see that nation state, however, hard to reform and full of inertia they may be, are experimenting in some special jurisdiction. So thanks for that. I'm just trying to see if Maria could join. She's not here at the moment. What I'm going to do, so basically, yeah, basically,
it's a great pleasure.
yeah. Sorry, just a second. Yeah, so basically, Maria was going to join. She might join at a later stage. She got some difficulties and unexpected events, and basically the question I was going to ask her is basically the same I asked Peter. Please, Maria, can you provide us a definition of a circular economy? Can you explain to us Bitcoiners how most people understand this notion? Where does this notion come from? What are the key dimensions to keep in mind when we analyze circular economy, right? So that was the question. Now I'm going to play a response. She's recorded this intervention in the afternoon and sent it to me. So here it is.
Hi, Jack. Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today in this very interesting roundtable and surrounded by great panelists. I'm very sorry I can't attend to the event live. I had an emergency I had to deal with, so I thought I might as well record my presentation to ensure that at least I could be there. So again, very sorry for not being there. So my name is Maria Castillo. I'm a PhD in management, and I am currently the social and environmental impact director at the ESSEC School of Management, so working in topics related to sustainability and inclusion. And I'm very interested in the topics that we'll be discussing here today. So I've been asked to answer the question of what circularity is. What is the circular economy? This idea of the concept of circularity, which can be quite vague or it can be a bit unclear for some people. And I think it's important to understand that where this notion of circularity and the circular economy came from before actually moving to understand how it is shaping this very interesting concept of circular Bitcoin economy. So what role Bitcoin might have when it comes to circular economy. So things that you will be discussing later today. So the concept of circularity is actually not as recent as we would think. This concept emerged in the late 60s with American scientists that began discussing the need to move towards completely closed systems where all resources basically circulate back and forth, never leaving the system, and thus never generating waste. So nothing is lost. We hear the topic of circular economy a lot lately. If you look at the news, if you just type something on your search engine related to circular economy, you'll find tons of resources, tons of information, concrete examples of what companies, what institutions, even countries are doing to move towards circular economies. But this concept has been around for a long, long time. And all of these discussions basically emerging because of the perceived inefficiencies of the economic and the industrial system at that time, so back in the 60s, but that we still see today. And we tend to depict that as being mostly what we call the linear system. So that's the image you see on the left, with the three graphs. You have the linear economy, which can often be referred to as cradle to grave, so cradle, birth, grave, death. And this basically refers to the idea that in today's system, we extract resources, we make something out of those resources, such as a product, we use that product, and then when we're done with it, we throw it away, and the product dies, and it doesn't generate any value back into the system. So we make, we use, we dispose, and it never goes back into the system. So this linear system is very inefficient because, of course, of the waste it produces, the losses it produces, and the costs that are associated to such losses. And of course, this has also negative impacts, especially when you think of today's context, when we're talking about the current environmental situation. All that waste and all those costs that are generated because of those inefficiencies, the inefficiencies in terms of the resource usage, resources that are not unlimited, bring big questions about the system and how that system needs to evolve. So the circular economy, or the notion of circularity, then refers today to a system that's restorative or regenerative by intention and by design. And I stress those two words, intention and design, because they are fundamental for the circular economy. It means that from the start, the system is designed to be circular, meaning that all actors within this ecosystem are actively involved in making a circular, self-sustaining, closed-loop system. So every actor needs to be a part of it, because that is the only way a perfect circular economy can work. So that requires getting buy-in from all of those actors in the ecosystem, depending on what we're talking about, if it's industrial, financial, a community, or a sector, that might take different shapes. But it's getting everyone on board. So it's getting people to buy in. It's developing the right infrastructure to allow that to happen, and ensuring that there is a clear understanding of what circularity means and why it might be beneficial to everyone. And understanding this is not always easy. Understanding the benefits, what you get out of it, is essential when you want to get people to shift, right? And to engage in things that they have not been doing in the same way before. So this is really critical. So as I said before, moving towards this closed loop model requires quite a radical rethinking of our system, of the processes that have been put in place and have existed in many cases for many, many years. It requires a rethinking of the interaction among the actors of the system. So it requires disrupting the status quo, and we all know that that is quite challenging, and that can be extremely complex, and can lead also to a lot of resistance. But moving towards circular economy will drive innovation. It drives innovation. We're seeing clear examples of that today, as I said, more in the industrial and production side of things, with companies investing in R&D, finding ways to close that loop, finding ways to use resources more efficiently, finding ways to give a second life to products that they considered as having no value before. So this is really happening. We're seeing that innovation. So moving towards that will optimize, the processes that we talked about. It will optimize, hopefully, interactions, and it should reduce also, barriers and costs that exist in our current linear system. And again, the whole idea behind this is that we move to a system that's more efficient. So we need to remove the end-of-life concept and replace it with the idea of reusing, right? Nothing is wasted. Everything is reused. Everything goes back. And the end goal of the circular economy, really the end, kind of the most optimistic end goal of the circular economy, is that we should be creating a system that can accomplish sustainable development. And that implies creating environmental quality, right? So if we're talking about resources, it means using resources correctly, because we are running out of some of these resources. but it also means creating economic prosperity, social equity, so that we benefit everyone around the globe, so that we benefit current generations, but we also have a long-term perspective and benefit future generations. And yes, that's a huge and very optimistic objective, but that is the end goal. And everything we need to design, redesign, rethink needs to work in and go in the direction of achieving that. So when I think, circular economy, there's this idea of design and intention. Well, we need to design a system with the intention of achieving these goals. And that's, again, from the start. So it's about creating value. And it's not only about creating value, it's also about reducing value destruction. And I think this is essential in the circular economy, this idea of reducing value destruction. So it requires a whole system perspective, it requires new business models, and it requires a new definition of our current system. So no easy task, but definitely essential, I think, as we move forward and rethink the way we do things and we operate in our economic system today. And beyond the industrial conceptualization of circularity, we also find this term emerging more and more in the financial system, with a current system that is also quite linear, with a number of intermediaries, high costs, high inefficiencies, high barriers to access, particularly for certain parts of the population. And when you look at the numbers, and you have the number here in the slide, and these are the numbers given in the World Bank, who does studies on financial inclusion, but we see today that there are over 1 billion people that are unbanked or underbanked. 1 billion people, this is massive. And that can be due to many different reasons, partly because of the difficulty to access traditional financial services in some regions, so having no banking institution, physical banking institution nearby, or potentially not having the right access to internet to be able to also access some of the online financial services that are proposed today. Or it can be because the minimum requirements to open an account or a financial product are out of reach for this population. In some cases, it's because the fees or the cost of managing money and moving money around are too high. And finally, there is still a lack of trust in the financial system in many segments of the population. Some cases because of volatility and instability of markets, because of experiences with previous financial crisis, because of corruption. There's many reasons, but this is a big barrier, right? So how in the financial system today, what opportunities exist to move away from this linear system that's inefficient, that's costly, that is not creating value for everyone? And there are huge opportunities to rethink the system, to innovate, to disrupt, and break away from what's being proven as inefficient, not generating value for all, and moving towards a circular model that democratizes access to financial services, that promotes financial inclusion, that generates value, and that doesn't destroy value. I think, again, this is the big, right, ideal goal, but that's what we need to be looking at, and that's what we need to be discussing. So what that closed loop, self-sustaining model looks like in a financial system, I think that's still being defined. I think that's still being tested. And I think what's happening around the notion of circular Bitcoin economies that you'll be talking about later is very interesting. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. There's still a lot of challenges, out there that exist. And those challenges can include, how you actually create financial sustainability out of these new models. How do you scale up this kind of circular models in the financial system and in also in production and industrial systems to make sure they're financially sustainable, to make sure they make sense and they can last and benefit in the short term, but also in the long term. At the same time, how do you tear down, strongly institutionalized ways of working? We've been in this linear mindset for ages. So how do you tear down and move away from these institutionalized ways of working, of doing transactions, of producing, of consuming, of understanding the system? So modifying deeply rooted behaviors, not so easy, because that requires, as I said before, buy-in from a number of actors, particularly from actors that have influence in the system, that can nudge the ecosystem towards a more circular direction and then have others kind of follow. But this is a huge challenge, I think, that we face today in the shift towards the circular economy. And when we see it, and what we see happening, in the industrial sector with companies, is that this is moving, but it's moving slowly because it's still proving to be not financially viable, and that is still causing a lot and putting a lot of barriers for full adaptation of a more circular model. And I think this will be the same case when we're talking about the financial system, as we have ideas of how to create a closed loop financial economy. We still have challenges to that. And when we need proof of concept, we need to show that this works so that we can get massive adoption. And we are still in that process of testing, in that process of ensuring that things work. So how do we get there? And I think this raises a big question and an interesting question, and I'd be happy to hear what the other panelists think about this. But what is the need for public policy in this sphere? We see more and more public policy in Europe for to provide incentives for circular economy in the industrial sector, in some sectors of the economy particularly. So what is the role of public policy, of governments, in shifting towards circularity, and how will that help to accelerate things? And when we're talking about, cryptocurrencies, or we're talking about money, what is the role of public policy to try to accelerate, this shift towards circularity, and mostly to this kind of perfect circularity where everything is connected and where everyone is on board? So we do see an interesting movement. We see things happening. We hear, and you will hear a lot of interesting examples later today, but there are still many challenges ahead. And those challenges are not always easy to overcome, but there are massive opportunities and there are signs of movements. And I think we will be seeing much more of those in the next few years. And I think the examples that are going to be discussed with you today are great examples of inspiration that still raise questions, that still face challenges, but that will, I think, help drive the movement of circularity, circular economy into a much wider and scaled up dimension. So thank you very much for your attention, for your time, and please, you have my contact here. Feel free to contact me if you want to connect, if you want to engage. You can contact me through LinkedIn. Very happy to connect. Thank you very much, and I apologize again for not being here for the discussion with you.
I'm stunned. I'm stunned, Maria, by the quality of this presentation. Again, it's a remarkable presentation that you delivered with a great in-depth definition and really a good framework for understanding what circular economy can encompass, both in the industrial sphere, but also in the financial domain. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said, but it certainly provides us the basis, the reference to pursue our conversation. I'll just highlight the things that you said. I will come back to it. The role of public policy, and you said something that really caught my attention when you said people want to do it. There's probably a strong political will and much willingness from different stakeholders to make this happen, but it's not financially viable. And that may have to do with the actual way the financial system and the monetary system is set up. We'll explore this a little bit later on. Thanks again. If you're listening to us, great thanks for this high quality presentation. I think we're done with this first step, defining and framing the terms. Now we're going to give the floor to Scott and Quentin, who are, as I mentioned earlier, in an ideal position to provide us with an overview of what Bitcoiners are doing on the ground in terms of Bitcoin circular economy and Citadels. Quentin, are you ready to present? Or we can start with Scott. It's up to you. You need to unmute yourself, though.
Yeah, I can start. I took a lot of notes. I don't have a presentation, but I have some ideas and some experience to share, so I can go with that.
So the idea is, I'll mention it again. Basically, you're the international expansion manager of Mi Primer Bitcoin. Mi Primer Bitcoin is an organization about promoting the education, Bitcoin education all around the world. And so in your position, you're well placed to see what's happening. So yeah, share with us whatever analysis, quantitative, qualitative, that you can make to describe those projects that Bitcoiners are doing and how they relate to these notions of circular economy and Citadel. The floor is yours, Quentin.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacques, for the introduction. So yeah, I have a couple of things I can talk about that are relevant to the discussion today. So I live in El Salvador. I'm French, but I've arrived here in the end of 2022. I live in a circular economy here in Berlin. It's a mountain town in El Salvador, and I've also started a circular economy on an island called La Piraya. And now I work with Mi Primer Bitcoin as the international relations manager. And so what we do is we are creating a community of Bitcoin communities so that they can share best practices and just speed up the timeline by all learning from each other. So I took a lot of notes. It was very, very interesting. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Maria, for these presentations. I'd like to touch on a few points before starting sharing my experiences. I would like to say that free cities and circular economies are very much aligned, right? They don't have the same approach, but they have the same goal, which is local sovereignty and freedom. And this is what we're all looking for, right? So this is very, very interesting. So I heard Maria mention that in circular economies and with circularity, we were looking for building closed loop systems where nothing enters and nothing leaves, no input, no output, everything stays inside the closed loop system. And I would say I disagree with that vision, because if you follow systems theory, technically there are no closed systems, right? Like every system, which is something that is defined by humans, that doesn't really have boundaries besides the ones that we attribute to them, exist inside other bigger systems and are composed by smaller systems. And so there is always communication and a flow of resources, information, structure between all of these levels of organization. So this is just a premise I want to pose before continuing, because for circular economies in terms of Bitcoin, the goal is not to create this circularity and to create like autonomous zones, right? We are still trying to spread Bitcoin and this movement, this grassroots movement around the world from the bottom up. So again, we're still trying to create link, especially between the circular economies. And so my first experience was in Isla La Piraya. I was given the hard task of bootstrapping a circular economy on this island of El Salvador, which is a small island, and it had foundational problems that needed to be addressed to kickstart this circular economy. It has a lot of issues, like there's no trash management, there's no public lighting, there's flooding by both the rain and the seawater. So there was a ton of problems that we had to address before starting the circular economy project. But we use them to actually kickstart the circular economy by paying workers in Bitcoin. And so the goal was to bring them to accept Bitcoin as a way of payment and as a store of value, in exchange for work and in exchange as well for new revenue streams. Because again, even though it's a circular economy, things come in and things go out. Especially on this island, the idea was to bring tourism so that people could earn money via Bitcoin. So what we did is we organized an event, a beach soccer tournament, and beforehand we trained everyone on the island how to accept Bitcoin, the businesses, how to accept Bitcoin with special POSs for the event. We gave them English classes, Spanish classes. We created workshops for the entrepreneurs, a lot of things to prepare for this event, so that the day of the event, tourists would come and would spend the Bitcoin and create new revenue streams for the circular economy of La Piraya. But again, the goal, and this is where the circularity comes in, is that we wanted the Bitcoin, the money, to stay in the island. So this is when you have to do a lot of work beforehand. You have to go see the businesses and go see the suppliers of these businesses, so that all of them can accept Bitcoin, so that the workers can spend Bitcoin in the business, and that the business can spend its Bitcoin at their suppliers, and so on and so forth. So again, that highlights the difficulty of circular economies, right? Is that there is always a flow of money from outside and to the outside again. So the goal is to make it stay inside, but I don't think closing the system is something that is achievable in practice. So this is how we started. Then we gathered more engagement. People were ready to work with us, and so what we did is we continued with the same kind of process. We were working on the foundational level of the circular economy by managing bigger projects and rewarding people for their work in Bitcoin. So we built a road, we renovated the communal house, we renovated the beach soccer field, we even created a seawall. And so all of this participated to the creation of this circular economy on the island. Again, it could be circular, but only because there was input in terms of Bitcoin. We had a funding source that could input Bitcoin on the island, so that we could work on these projects and reward people for their work. So that was on the island. Again, another challenge is to have a group of people or individuals that pursue the project even though you're not there anymore. I'm not from the island, so I stayed for 6 months, and the challenge was always the end of the project. Like, how do we make sure that the circular economy continues to grow when I'm not here anymore to impulse the project and to oversee their completion? And so we found someone on the island. His name is Isaac, and he was a beach soccer professional player, and now he teaches kids how to play beach soccer, and he pays everything that is about that, like water, shirts, bowls, whatever. He pays everything in Bitcoin, and so we keep the momentum that we built. And there is another guy whose name is Jorge, who gives. He's part of my team. He's part of Mi Primer Bitcoin. He gives weekly classes about Bitcoin to the individuals of the island, so that they have a better understanding of how it works, why it's better than the dollar for even either saving or transacting. And so this is how we try to keep the project going. The other experience I have is I live in a circular economy. So this town called Berlin, it's a mountain town. It's very, very, very different from La Piraya. There's much more economic activity. There is, I would say big, but there is a small Bitcoin community, but very, very active, that successfully onboarded more than 100 businesses onto Bitcoin. So if you're a Bitcoiner, a tourist, a sovereign individual, you can come to this town and spend only Bitcoin. So this is very, very powerful. But again, it faces new challenges, right? One of them is, how do you bring more tourism, more revenue streams, so that the city can grow, can improve, etc. And there's also, how do you make sure that these businesses keep the Bitcoin to save in Bitcoin? How do you make sure that individuals go and spend Bitcoin, ask to be paid in Bitcoin, to close the loop of the circular economy? So this is one of the new challenges here. But again, I think circular economy is, the term circular economy is a bit has been a bit co-opted by Bitcoiners, because I don't think it perfectly fits the description of the basic circular economy. I would say that Bitcoin circular economy's aim is to bring back to the lower levels of organization, the individual, the family, the city, the value that has been sucked up by the higher levels of organization, like the government, by fiat money. And so I would say that for most countries, we shouldn't even wait for top-down policy, as the governments are the ones that are responsible for the exponential waste of resources via money printing. And I would end with the idea that Bitcoin is a grassroots movement from the bottom up, and Bitcoin communities and circular economies are the manifestation of this movement.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Quentin, to share with us this retrospective insight into this experience that you've had in La Piraya. I think you've highlighted pretty well the difficulty of engaging the community on the basis of genuine incentives they have to partake in the project. And in this case, that meant tourism, developing the tourism. So definitely some necessity to tap into some energy coming from outside the local system, right? But basically, you also suggested that we need to have a long-term horizon. It takes a lot of time. All these reflections you shared are going to be resonating with the experience that Daniel is going to share with us in the second segment of this program, when he'll describe his project in Merida. And so I'm sure there's going to be a good conversation around that. I think we can continue our journey with Scott Wolfe. Scott is not with us today at the very moment. Actually, he's listening to us, but is attending his young children. So we've pre-recorded a sort of interview. Again, it was the same question I was asking Scott. Is he able to? I asked him if he could share with us some overview of those so-called Bitcoin circular economy project or Citadel projects. And you'll see it's fairly interesting. In his presentation, he's basically characterizing this project in a fairly precise, accurate manner. So I'm just going to play the video right now. To have you with us, Scott. It's absolutely great to have you with us today. I mean, there's going to be plenty of opportunity to bring you back here properly live. But I understand that you've got some fatherly duties that are taking priority as they should, which is why we are recording this in advance. Anyway, I've invited you to join the roundtable because of your brand new hat, that of coordinator of the Federation of the Bitcoin Circular Economies. And I understand that it's a new thing that you've been setting up, right?
Indeed. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to join you and to do my best to speak on behalf of the Federation and my colleagues who are working to set it up. But you're right, it's a very fresh organization. We've been discussing establishing this federation for the last 6 months or so, and we're finally at the point now where we're building some organizational infrastructure, developing a bit of a roadmap and a vision for what's possible, and we're really excited to begin rolling it out over the coming months.
I think we first met 6 months ago when you were just just starting really to establish the federation, and since then I understand that you've been traveling quite a bit to discover, to map these initiatives and characterize them. So how would you define a Bitcoin circular economy, Scott?
At core, a Bitcoin circular economy is a defined jurisdiction, if that's perhaps a neighborhood, a town, a city, perhaps even a larger geographical area like a region or even an entire country, where there is a clear vision for using Bitcoin as money, as a means of exchange on an increasing basis. I think the aspirational vision is that one could live on a Bitcoin standard in a Bitcoin circular economy where one could pay for all of one's daily ongoing needs, one's electricity bill, one's groceries, petrol or gas for one's car, rent or a mortgage payment, etc. That all of those can be paid for with Bitcoin, and that it's not just a matter of paying for Bitcoin, but really Bitcoin circulates through the economy, so that if I was buying my daily coffee at a little cafe, that the owner of that cafe would hopefully be paying their employees at least in part in Bitcoin, and any money that's spent at that cafe would then be used by the merchant to take care of their own needs, purchasing supplies from suppliers, paying their own living costs through Bitcoin, etc. So the idea is that money comes into the community and stays in the community as Bitcoin, that is. At the Federation, we wanted to figure out a way or ways that we could actually bring some increased definition to what Bitcoin circular economies look like, and some ways to help local Bitcoin circular economies, wherever they are on their journey to evolve to next steps or more defined expressions of that circular economy. And so we've started by not only identifying communities that in essence are operating as a Bitcoin circular economy, regardless of how far along they are on that journey, but to try to bring some definition and to categorize those in ways that we can help them and help others understand what distinguishes an early stage Bitcoin circular economy from one that's a little bit more developed. And so we've started by categorizing Bitcoin circular economies according to 5 tiers, tiers 1 through 5, which as you go from tier 1 and tier 5, it reflects a bit more of a fully developed expression of the Bitcoin circular economy. And there are core components that fit into each of those tiers. So you satisfy more of those components as you go further along the tier structure.
Right. And just is that possible for you to give us a glimpse of what are those criteria that along which you progress and you move from the first tier to the 5th tier?
Absolutely. So from the outset, it's important for any movement, any organization that's bringing together entities into a federation or an association to have some clear marker points or boundaries as to, what is a minimum basis to be involved in or participate in that movement, to be considered a member or group, a constituent group
minimum
of that movement.
Requirements, right?
And so, in terms of minimum requirements, a tier 1 is essentially that in the local community, there is evidence that Bitcoin is being used as a medium of exchange. And that could be at a very, very small scale. It might be one merchant, it might be 2 or 3 people in the community who are using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange for daily life. A second is that there should be or needs to be an identified leader or group of individuals, a Bitcoiner or Bitcoiners within the group that are sort of taking under their charge the development and the vision for a Bitcoin circular economy. The idea of intention. And that there's a focal point and leaders who want to help advance a Bitcoin circular economy. And then third, that they've identified a particular jurisdiction that they intend to work in. So that might be the local neighborhood. As I said, it could be an entire town. It could be an entire nation. So it's those 3 core components: that there's some evidence that Bitcoin is being used as money, as a medium of exchange, that there's an identified leader or group of individuals who are who have identified their intention to grow a circular economy, and then third, that they've identified a jurisdiction that they're going to be working in.
So the progression then, as you move to the higher tiers, is merely a reflection of an increasing intensity of penetration and adoption of Bitcoin within the economy, or are there other
that's
dimensions?
Right, that's right, and the types of activities. And so, if I was just to look at this sort of in terms of bookends of tier 1 to tier 5, tier 5 reflects, to the best of what we're able to observe right now and understand about the evolution of a Bitcoin circular economy. Tier 5 would mean that something like Bitcoin Akasi in South Africa or Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, that not only is Bitcoin being used as a medium of exchange in the local community, not only is there a leadership group for this, but there's actually an organized, incorporated entity that is driving the move for a Bitcoin circular economy. And that organization has staff and volunteers which are advancing this. And then one of the sort of furthest points of development of the Bitcoin circular economy is that there's not a shift, but a progression from the use of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange to actually advancing the idea of Bitcoin as a unit of account. And so in El Sonte and in the Akasi outside of Mossel Bay, where Bitcoin Akasi operates, both of those communities are actually trying to do whatever they can to have Bitcoin be the unit of account for their organizations. And so they talk about the value and the price of things not with reference to fiat anymore. So not with reference to the rand or not with reference to the US dollar, but Bitcoin itself. Staff are paid in Bitcoin. The engagement of local merchants and the discussion is with Bitcoin as the reference point. And so shifting the narrative from Bitcoin in relation to fiat to Bitcoin being the standard. And so that gives you a sense of the sort of bookends from a nascent group in tier 1 that has the idea of establishing a Bitcoin circular economy with individuals who are taking leadership of that, and there being some small evidence of Bitcoin being used as a medium of exchange, all the way to tier 5, where you have a much more organized, resourced, staffed approach to building out the circular economy with Bitcoin ultimately as your local unit of account. And then in between that, from tier 1 to tier 5, you have a progression of different types of activities that would reflect a more robust expression of a circular economy as you go along. So adding into moving on from tier 1, so adding in local meetups and local other local educational efforts, doing organized onboarding and education and support for merchants, those sorts of things. So that's intended to provide individuals working in circular economies and anyone who's thinking of starting a local circular economy a bit of a guide or a roadmap as to how to evolve.
That's interesting. I think I'll paste, a link directing to your website.
That's right.
Are you able to see some patterns, geographically speaking, whereby in certain region of the world, the Bitcoin circular economy trends toward a certain function, or
Certainly. I mean, there are a few that are clear. The differences between a circular economy in the global north or in a more, economically advanced country like in Lugano in Switzerland or Madeira, as opposed to in the global south. The local context, the prevailing economic conditions, disparities, etc., are going to drive understandably the reasons for the circular economy, how it takes shape, and some of the needs. And so there are some distinctions between circular economies in the global north and in the global south. And then aside from that, I don't know if I would describe patterns or trends as much as to say that, and this is something that attracted me to Bitcoin circular economies as I got to know some of them a bit more closely, is that they truly are community driven in a fundamental sense. And that's something that was very near and dear to me and important to me, coming from my work with community health centers around the world. In the community health center world, we used to say, once you've seen one community health center, you've seen one community health center, which was a way of saying that while there is a shared model and approach to integrating primary health care through teams of providers with health promotion programs, illness prevention services, and so forth, they're very much attuned to and driven by the local needs of the community. And so similarly with Bitcoin circular economies, what I've observed and I think is part of the virtue of these circular economies is really they're from the grassroots up and attuned to local needs. And so there are different entry points into building the circular economy, and by trial and error, I think each local circular economy is identifying factors for success and what is most needed in the local community. And so we as a federation are really trying to bring together, all of these different circular economies to learn from each other, to share experiences, and to, where possible, to pair like communities with each other for support and so forth.
Scott, thanks a lot for this great overview and an introduction to your work and that of your colleagues, members of the federation. Thanks a lot, and I hope we meet live here in a not too distant future.
Wonderful. Thanks for the invitation to join you, and just in parting, an open invitation. If anyone listening to this is beginning a local circular economy or has looked at our website and don't see their local circular economy represented in some way, please reach out to us. Again, we're just getting started. This is a very administratively lean global movement, and so any omissions is not on purpose. So please reach out, and look forward to connecting with new groups and groups that we weren't aware of, and figuring out how to help you get connected to others and to moving forward. And looking forward to seeing where we are this time next year.
Yeah. So excellent overview, I think, from Scott. I don't know what you think, Peter, but I think it was quite helpful and very complementary to the contribution from Quentin, in the sense that is really showed. Is really insisted on the fact that it's a gradual process, and it's come up with some markers and criteria to assess the evolution of a community in this journey towards Bitcoin circularity. I'm tempted to get your feedback. You know, we've framed the conversation. Now we've had some glimpses into what a Bitcoiner circular economy is, and Quentin has alluded to the notion of citadels. What you know, in your view, in what we've just heard, to what extent would you say that those Bitcoin citadels or circular economies reflect the vision behind the free cities? How much do they embrace the same kind of ambition of you know, expanding the dimensions of freedom for the individuals, and how do they differ?
So free cities can certainly be places where I can see these Bitcoin economies thriving. I mean, in general, the goal of free cities is that they support members of society to engage in voluntary free exchange and free interactions within a legal framework that protects everyone's individual rights. So you have, for example, clearly defined property rights for people if they want to run a business and exchange. You have certain rules about violating other people's property rights, and you have security. But beyond that, the system itself is really quite agnostic with regard to, you know, what specific currencies people are using. But it tends to be quite popular with Bitcoiners because existing nation states often put obstacles in the way of these circular economies developing. For example, a lot of countries will treat Bitcoin as an asset that needs to be taxed when it rises in fiat value, rather than a commodity that can simply be exchanged like a currency without tax implications. So that's something that definitely wouldn't exist in a free city. You would treat this commodity like any other commodity, and it would have, you know, exemption from tax if you were able to, if you were using it in your transaction. And I think that in itself would really help to cultivate the economies that we've heard there in the presentation. It was very helpful for me to see how it's all laid out in terms of these various steps, how mature a particular Bitcoin circular economy can become. I visited various places that are at different stages within that hierarchy. So, you know, my local town, for example, there might be like one person that accepts Bitcoin. So we'd be stage one on that. We're not zero, but we have one person. So we would just about get onto the tier. And then I thought it was interesting what he said about the idea of a specific organization that is pushing forward Bitcoin adoption. That's something that exists in Madeira. I'm part of the Free Madeira advisory board that's kind of working on some of that stuff. So it's good to see that that's kind of listed as a key function for like moving up the hierarchy there. And yeah, like I think probably the most developed circular economy that you've got is the one in El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach, which seems to have lots of those elements like specific organization, bespoke wallets, education campaigns. So it's very helpful for me to see it all set out. And I think what the connection with free cities would be is that free cities really remove all of the artificial barriers that stop those economies from emerging. And I think they will emerge naturally if you just remove the barriers and allow people to explore what their preferences are in terms of money and in terms of trading within a local economy.
Thanks. Excellent. Quentin, do you want to make a further comment? I mean, perhaps on the extent to which what you've described, what has been described as Bitcoin circular economy, covers the definition of presented by Maria. We remember that she indicated that circular economy is something that you see both in the industrial and in the financial sector. Any observation you want to make on that?
I think I lost you in the end, but yeah, I very much agree with what Peter just said. I I see a marriage between free cities and Bitcoin circular economies. Uh, I would say that most Bitcoin circular economies don't have the legal framework that free cities have, uh, which would be very helpful, though not an absolute necessity. We can see there are a lot of examples of Bitcoin circular economies in places that are not very friendly towards Bitcoin. But again, the goal is sovereignty at the local level, right? And I think that Bitcoin is great at both bringing back power to the localities and creating bridges between these islands of sovereignty, meshing them into a global network. And here I'd like to highlight that local and global are not mutually exclusive. They're complementary, and we can see that with Bitcoin. It's global money that allows local communities to thrive by connecting them all together and protecting them from the theft of their resources that is the result of fiat currencies and monetary inflation. And this is what we're trying to achieve with Mi Primer Bitcoin. We're trying to empower individuals with Bitcoin financial education by empowering the local communities of Bitcoin educators that do the hard work of educating their peers about Bitcoin. And we started with El Salvador because it had the legal framework that allowed us to create this example that can be replicated and adapted to all kinds of local contexts throughout the world.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Quentin. I was going to make an input, a technical input in this discussion. You know, at first glance, and even prior to joining this roundtable, whilst I was reflecting upon the relevance of organizing a conversation around the theme, I was thinking, you know, it seems to me that those Bitcoin circular economies are mainly about developing an alternative financial system, an alternative monetary system, whereby participants gradually adopt Bitcoin as a means of payment, then as a store of value, and eventually as a unit of account. And less as a circular economy in the industrial way that has been described by Maria. That is to say, you know, bringing efficiency and sustainability in the production and consumption process, promoting recycling, reuse, etc., better use of natural resources, etc. Well, it seems to me that this intuition is proving quite correct so far. But it's my firm belief, really, that Bitcoin is fostering a more circular economy in the broader
Definitely.
sense of the term. And I believe that this influence is both systemic and pervasive in many sectors. And we're yet to find all the use cases where Bitcoin is actually promoting circularity throughout the economy. And so I've prepared a presentation to present this. I'll just present it now. Yeah. So I believe that, yeah, in terms of the systemic influence of Bitcoin on the economy, which is promoting more circularity, well, there's the fact that sound money, and by sound money we mean any money that doesn't lose its purchasing power, hard money. There's a technical, you know, there's a technical criteria to define it. It's the stock to flow thing. But anyway, the thing is, when you have sound money, proper money, money that doesn't inflate, money that doesn't lose its purchasing power. Gold used to be quite a sound money, and Bitcoin is the soundest money ever invented. When you have such a sound money, it lowers your time preference. And lowering time preference means you start curbing consumerism. So time preference is this notion that's evidenced by the marshmallow test. You know, this little boy is looking at the marshmallow. He's wondering whether he's going to eat now or whether he's going to wait, because it's been said, look, if you can wait for 10 minutes and don't eat the marshmallow, you're going to be rewarded with a second or a third marshmallow. So if you know that by resisting the urge of immediate consumption, you're going to be rewarded, then naturally you are encouraged to reflect upon the opportunity costs, right? So you start comparing the benefits of consuming right now versus the benefits of saving for greater gains. And the reality, and it's not theoretical, you know, it sounds like a test in a laboratory. But when you start embracing Bitcoin, you find out the reality of this very rapidly, because Bitcoiners have realized the value of saving money in a sound of saving. Yeah, they realize the value of saving in a sound money which properly store their value. You know, you can see that year after year, your purchasing power is increasing. So you'd better save your Bitcoin. You'd better hold them, hodl them, right? As opposed to fiat money, if you keep your money, if you wait in front of your dollar bill as you would wait in front of your marshmallow, you're not going to be rewarded. At the opposite, you're going to be punished. And the more you wait, the more you defer your consumption, the less you're going to be able to buy. So basically what we're saying is that with a bad money, a money which is inflated, which is debased, which loses its purchasing power, well, you're basically incentivized to consume as opposed to save. And so the Bitcoiners, they've got memes and jokes for this, and you know, they, for instance, so these typically are the type of funny pictures and memes that Bitcoiners are going to post on Twitters, just to show that, you know, when you are hodling Bitcoin, when you're saving in Bitcoin, typically you're going to wait until the last moment before replacing your socks and pants. What it means is that Bitcoiners are rarely shopping addicts. They're rarely fast fashion consumers, and you rarely find them queuing to get the last iPhone. So, and it's a journey that most people who embrace Bitcoin are doing, is that you start saving. You stop spending for stuff, or you think twice, or you think thrice. You think much more. You think about the opportunity cost, because the opportunity cost is huge. If you're patient, you have the hope, the conviction that on the long term, you know, beyond the volatility, beyond the short to medium term volatility of Bitcoin, its purchasing power increases, right? So you save for future and more meaningful investment. At some stage, you're going to spend your Bitcoin to buy a house or to make an investment that is much more meaningful than the kind of stuff that you would that you used to buy before, right? So in a very fundamental way, and here we're talking about Bitcoin, but that would be the same if the fiat money was coming back to something which is more conservative in terms of its inflation and loss of purchasing power. But with Bitcoin, we have within society a reawakening of the notion of opportunity cost, and this is curbing consumerism, right? So that's the systemic influence of Bitcoin. Yeah, just because you're going to be buying stuff that you want to hold for the long term, you're going to be mending your trousers the way your mom used to do it when you were a kid. Plenty of stuff like that. You're going to think, yeah, you're going to be less attracted by fashion, more about the stuff that's really useful, that makes a difference in your life, right? Okay, we can talk about that later on. I wanted also to insist on the influence that the pervasive influence that Bitcoin is going to have in promoting circularity in a wide range of sectors. And here I'm just going to take a case study. I'm taking the sector of sanitation. That's a sector that I know. I've been working in this sector for 15 years or so, and I've loved it. For some reason, I didn't work in the financial sector because maybe somehow unconsciously they told me, money is dirty, don't touch it. I ended up working in deep shit. Basically sanitation is the management of shit. But it's extremely interesting because just like money, water management, sanitation, those are the basic blocks of society. If you can't manage your waste and your water properly, you can't grow as a society. And same thing for money, really. And sanitation is also quite special in the sense that, since the beginning, we know that this so-called waste, the shit, the feces, the excreta, there's plenty words for it. When you don't want to say shit, you got the academic words. But we have always know that this is not a waste. This is a resource that you can use to fertilize your field, right? And so the circularity in sanitation is somehow already ingrained in the mentality of people, but there's a lot more that can be done. So I'm going to show you this a few ways in which Bitcoin can further bring further circularity to the existing sanitation sector. I've taken this illustration from the Toilet Board Coalition. It's quite useful. Basically, if we look at this, from a business perspective, if we look at this sector, we can distinguish the toilet marketplace, which is really about providing access to sanitation. So we'll talk about that later. And the circular sanitation marketplace, whereby businesses are providing transport, treatment, and reuse for this so-called waste, right? If we look at the toilet marketplace, those businesses are going to be developing solutions for toilet access, whether in public or private settings. So it's here. And those can be centralized and decentralized systems, depending on whether you're on a sewer system or maybe if you're using a septic tank. And this can be in rural, urban, and peri-urban settings. If you look at the circular sanitation marketplace, and if we're focusing on transport at the moment, that is at the bottom of this picture, it's really about resource collection. So it might be pit emptying, or emptying the septic tank or that sort of thing, and transportation, either by truck or by the sewer system, right? And then there's the treatment. The next process is about treating the wastes, and the emphasis now is to talk about resource recovery rather than waste management, and that's in tune with the circular economy approach, right? It's increasingly connecting with the biocycle, and in terms of wastes. Now there's really processes to recover the resources from a great diversity of wastes. So consumer, industrial, and agricultural waste, toilet waste, kitchen waste, animal waste, compostable packaging. All these wastes are being treated, and their recovery is attempted to different degrees. Reuse. The idea really is that the output products are sold back to local business or used on site. So I can mention a few examples. We are familiar with the notion that treated wastewater can be reused in the industry. in a cooling system or also in forestry as a mean of irrigation. Likewise, the agriculture sector is reusing nutrients, organic matter, compost, nitrogen and phosphorus derived from those treatment processes. Now you have a whole range of new stuff that are being developed. I'm not too familiar with the protein meal for pet and farm animals. I wonder if that has to do with the bees and the insect and everything. I don't know too much about it. But there is, of course, public, private, or industrial use of energy products, fuel, electricity, and heat, and some innovative product. I'm not going to dwell on this. What we need to understand is that this sector is producing, from what are a lot of wastes are being reused and add value to plenty other activities. So where can Bitcoin foster more circularity to the sanitation economy? So I've identified at least 3 areas where this can be the case. The first area is the energy products. And here we're talking about methane mitigation, which is really a very strong use case for harnessing the power of Bitcoin. And here we can mention the great work of Daniel Batten, who's been studying and really uncovering the huge potential that Bitcoin is bringing to capture methane, which is considered by the UNEP as the strongest lever to reduce climate change. So we know, at least UNEP states that methane is causing 84 more warming than CO2, and it's rising at a parabolic rate. So in his research, Daniel also indicates that there are 2 key anthropogenic sources of methane. It's the agriculture, I guess the cattle, and the landfill gas. And the landfill gas are on track to be our first methane source by 2032, right? What Daniel is also explaining is that the best way to destroy that methane is using it to generate power, right? So you can generate power with a generator and then produce electricity. But in 70% of cases, the grids cannot take that power, and using it on site is the best option. Well, the options that you have on site are e-trucks, high-performance computing, or Bitcoin mining. And so in his research, Batten has spotted landfills where Bitcoin mining can be deployed, and the expected results are the following. After 1 year, you can expect a reduction of 4 million tons of CO2, which is equivalent to 153 million trees planted. After 3 years, we can expect to those activities, those mining activities, mining methane basically, can offset all Bitcoin's emission, making Bitcoin the cleanest industrial activity on the earth, probably from a CO2 perspective. And by 2030, it can offset the emission of the whole Scandinavian region. So don't take my words for granted. Those QR codes will lead you to the research, the publication, the work that Daniel has done on this. But here, clearly, we have an example, a clear use case where Bitcoin can bring further circularity in the sanitation economy by basically using methane, this waste, as a super resource to mine the most precious money on earth. The same thing can be said about agriculture. The human and the animals, like the cows, are producing methane, which can be collected and transformed into electricity. And again, Bitcoin mining will yield will yield economic benefits for the farmers, as well as environmental benefits, as we've just mentioned. So here, if you follow this link, you'll end up viewing a great documentary produced by Bitcoin Magazine, I think, and with the journalist John Nakamoto, who did a great work. So this is about a farm in Ireland. It's a real case and it's working well. So that's the first area. The second area has got to do with sanitation entrepreneurs and financial inclusion. Well, typically, if you're in Africa, in many regions of the world, many districts are not going to be sewered, and a lot of the sanitation is going to rely on small businesses that are going to empty your septic tank and transport the load to the nearby treatment plant. Now, those guys are, generally very informal. They're largely unbanked, and they are super vulnerable by weak local currencies. If they use their local currency, there's no way they can save in this currency. The inflation, the loss of purchasing power in this currency is huge. So there's no way they can't really save for further investment or for proper maintenance of their trucks or expansions of their capacities. And they don't really have access to financial services. So for this population of entrepreneur, which are so critical for the well-functioning of the whole sanitation of chain of service, a Bitcoin can be a solution as a store of value, or with the wallets that we have now, they can also use stable coins. So that's a second use case where Bitcoin can help these people withstand financial shocks. And finally, the toilet marketplace. I think that there are some opportunities to explore with regard to heating and drying. It's important to know, for those who are not too familiar with the mining of Bitcoin, it's important to figure out that it's producing a lot of heat. The computer is producing a lot of heat, which can support more profitable heating or drying solution. So you see already some Bitcoin mining paired with domestic heating, with the heating of greenhouses to grow tulips, onions, flowers, whatever, and to heat swimming pools. So not only are you heating the greenhouse or the pools as you would do otherwise, but at the same time you're doing some calculation that you're rewarded for, right? So I guess that there are some avenues to be explored here with regard to toilet manufacturing, which uses a lot of energy for drying. A lot of heat is being produced, and there's probably something to explore here. And likewise for toilet paper manufacturing, where drying processes are very intensive, right? So that's pretty much it. I mean, just through this example, which is only partly researched, I mean, that of the methane is properly researched by Daniel Batten. That of the sanitation entrepreneur is something that I've studied personally, and there's been extensive research on this population, on their significance, and how financially excluded and vulnerable they are. So it's a critical use case, I would say. And the last one, with regard to heating and drying, is a prospect. It needs to be explored, but the sure thing is in other sectors, agriculture and others, I mentioned them, we already have very profitable application. So it's economically and environmentally meaningful. That's what I wanted to say about this issue. I guess we are approaching this moment where I wanted to bring Peter and Ronnie to discuss our topic of the day from a technical perspective. Peter, I think you may have some echo, don't you? I don't know if you can mute.
Not sure. Can you hear an echo when I'm speaking?
No, it's when I'm speaking. Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn off when you're speaking.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we need to send a message to Ronnie. Ronnie, you're muted at the okay, good. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, so I think we need to address the topic of the day from a technological perspective. I'm not the techie guy in the room, that's for sure. But I wanted to get your perspective, Peter and Ronnie, on those issues. Peter, when we prepared this conversation, we discussed the thesis of the sovereign individual. The Sovereign Individual is a book which is basically describing the importance of certain macro drivers for the evolution of humanity. And technology is certainly one of the 3 or 4 big macro drivers that are being described. Can you tell us more about it and what it means in terms of how society will tend to organize in the information age? What's happening in the past 50 years is the transition from the industrial age to the informational age, and the emergence of cryptography is one dimension of it. Can you explain to us how this transition, this technological breakthrough, is influencing the way people organize in a society and the type of institutional setups that are going to evolve as a result?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, The Sovereign Individual, I think it first came out in 1997. And it was a very interesting book because it made the case that there was the way in which society is structured is profoundly affected by technology. So there's this interesting chapter at the beginning of the book where it describes how states were able to gain the power that they have today, which largely came as a result of the Industrial Revolution, where most of the economic value being generated was taking place around factories. And factories, due to agglomeration benefits, were located in cities. So what you ended up having is large populations that were centered within a very small geographical area. And what that meant is that the politicians that were in charge of those areas were able to draw on a lot of resources in terms of taxes because they had a population that was pretty much linked to this specific location. The population couldn't very easily move to another place. So they had these large amount of values being created in a small geographical area. And that led to states growing in power more and more. So you had previously it was like an agrarian society where population was scattered. Then you had this condensing of populations on urban centers. It makes the case of what we're seeing now in the information age is that the economy is moving further away from physical manufacturing and more towards intangible things. So services that are provided purely in the digital economy, like the FANG stocks, the Facebook, Google, Netflix, whatever. These companies are operating largely in the digital economy. And because they're digital, they can have premises that are based in different geographical jurisdictions, and they can structure their affairs so that it's very difficult for governments to tax them in the way they would in conventional states. And that same kind of technological trend, whereby more and more of us are moving into the digital economy, is starting to give citizens more power with respect to governments than they used to. Like now, if you're someone who's a computer programmer and you don't like the government that you're living under, you don't like the rules and regulations. The environment around you is not as safe or clean as you'd like. It's easier than ever to move to a different place and be subject to a different set of rules, different living environment, different tax regime. So this trend in general, I think, is really important for putting more power in the hands of individual people with respect to their governments. And what we're seeing with the Free Cities movement is that a lot of the people that are operating in that digital economy are coming to us and saying, like, we're maybe not 100% satisfied with the place we're living now. Is there somewhere else that we can live that better meets our needs? And that's essentially what Free Cities are doing. They're meeting the demand, firstly, for that globally mobile population. And then I think what's going to follow is, you start to see like the digital nomads, the single travelers that can move easily, be followed then by families and people that want to establish a more permanent base. So the sovereign individual thesis, I think, is proved to be remarkably prophetic, and it's definitely influencing the trend towards people seeking out new jurisdictions, and it's influencing the demand for the kind of jurisdictions that we're working with in the Free Cities community.
Excellent. Yeah. So here there's a clear indication that the technology is pushing towards more of this experimentation, more decentralization, and more growth of these alternative models, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. There's people have more choice now, and so where there's a demand, I think you will eventually get a supply. Entrepreneurs will realize that there's this new demand for new kinds of jurisdiction, and there are actually customers now that we live in a world where people are mobile and can transport their economic value relatively frictionlessly. We're starting to see people who will wake up to that and create products and services in places that fulfill that demand.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ronnie. I brought you on this roundtable because I met you a few weeks ago on Noster. It's an open source communication protocol, a bit like a free open source Twitter. And you're very much a technologist, a futuristic visionary mind. You're also a wise man who has witnessed the struggle of mankind stuck into centralized system and systems which tend to intensify their stronghold on the individual. What is, in your view, the source of hopelessness, and where do you see hope at the moment? I forgot to say, you're one of those guys who are technically involved in the development of the technical layer of those free city and special economic zone experiments.
Jack, one of the things that we have seen over the years due to the controlling centralized system is typically a sense of hopelessness. And when you have hopelessness, you tend to have a lot of cynics, a lot of cynical involvement, which can be dehumanizing, demoralizing, to say the least. And that comes specifically from this whole concept of controlling centralized systems. When you recognize that in a holistic way, and you look at it from the broader picture of what I loosely call the masses, you realize that you cannot fix the system from inside. And whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not, whether we accept it or not, you have to sidestep that system in order to come up with the hope that you would like to achieve. And that's where zones for economic development and employment empowerment, which are sometimes referenced as special economic zones, in certain regulatory frameworks, coupled with newer protocols such as Bitcoin, can assist or do assist. When you look at, yes, I do hang out in the Prospera Builders Network and others. But when you really look at these environments coupled with these protocols, Nostr also being one, you recognize that sidestepping the system is no longer sci-fi. It's practical, it's pragmatic, and in my opinion, it's the only way forward if you're going to talk about hope, because it brings to bear a possibility for bespoke, creative, revolutionary solutions that can enable various societies to propel themselves without having a stranglehold or a millstone around their neck. And that's where, to be honest, that's where I see hope, in the decentralized protocols that we have, coupled with a lot of the frameworks, such as what you see in Prospera.
Right. Okay. When you're involved in those projects, Prospera or other upcoming embryonic, but maybe developing similar project and in other region of the world, generally speaking, it's a project. It's a government project. It's something that's done with the support of the government. And as Peter was mentioning, they are willing to experiment. They need to have such boxes to stay up to date, or to anticipate changes, or to engage some sort of metamorphosis. How do you see this seeming contradiction between the apparent impossibility to reform themselves and this kind of escape towards increasing centralization and control, and as they're afraid to see the institutions at the moment are a bit obsolete in our countries, and they were developed. I think that's an interesting read as well. This fourth turning thing, which initially applies to the United States, but which is also developing concepts and principles applicable to the rest of the world. Typically, after a major crisis, such as a world war, you set up new institutions that are going to be relatively appropriate to the existing condition, demographic, economic, politic, you name it. And people are going to agree, partly because they've been so traumatized that they just need some peace. And the system works fairly well for a few decades, but gradually, you have entrenched interests that are starting to pervert the system and preventing the natural evolution that it would need to match the evolving circumstances. And now we end up in the current situations where basically in 2020 we are living in countries which institutions have not evolved as they should have, and the situation become quite explosive. So the government is stuck. It senses that chaos is brewing, that the population is not, as you say, the population is becoming cynical, the population is becoming hopeless, and it cannot really reform itself from within. But perhaps the solution, or part of the solution, is to start experimenting in small jurisdiction. Is that the way the nation states or whatever stakeholders involved in those experiments are playing the game, Peter?
I think you have to bear in mind about governments is that they're not singular entities. There's people often try and anthropomorphize governments as if they have one single personality and they act in a certain way, in a certain rational way, in order to kind of preserve their own interests. But in fact, governments are groupings of people that have their own individual interests. And there are people within governments that are very pleased with the system as it is, and they want to continue. The system is the system that got them to where they are. And so they also, they're very happy with perpetuating it. There are other people that get involved in politics because they have different motives. They might actually want to reform the system, move it in a less politically centralized direction. And I think one of the things that special economic zones allow you to do is allow some of the more reform-minded people an option for actually affecting some kind of change. Maybe it's not fully understood that this is happening by all of the other people that are agreeing to this, but typically it's a more effective way of actually changing things than trying to lobby a national government or trying to put a vote through Parliament. I mean, probably the best example of that is China, really, because China went through this really tumultuous period, really during all of the 20th century, but particularly during the communist period under Mao. There were all kinds of these political struggles going on. But the way it was able to reform was not by getting all those people in the center of Beijing to agree that a particular pathway that diverged from the old practices was appropriate. What they were able to do is say, okay, well, let's take a very small part of the country on the coast next to Hong Kong, and we will try out some new ideas there. And because they tried them out and because they worked, that ended up changing the whole debate in the country and moving things towards the more market-driven system that China now has today. So in answer to your question, can they be how is there a tension between, on the one hand, states getting more centralized, and on the other, we're seeing this kind of fragmenting of political power in smaller jurisdictions? I think there is that tension. There are elements definitely that are growing stronger. There are the globalist kind of groups, that maybe the WEFs, the World Economic Forums of the world, that are sort of pushing us towards a more centralized and controlled system. But at the same time, there are also market forces and zones and technologies like Bitcoin are pulling in another direction. So I see that really as the current interplay we have. And I think that overall, the decentralizing forces are going to win out because ultimately, they're the ones that are more efficient. They're the ones that deliver things that people want. Like, I think we've seen when we look back at history that systems that try and centralize and control ultimately don't succeed in the long run. And the systems that tend to succeed have more of at least a balance of centralization with decentralization.
Yeah. And they attract capital, in financial and human capital. And that's what Ronnie was telling me the other day. There's a lot of people who have not yet found how to engage, to harness their talents, their high competences in the existing system. And when they hear about open source protocols such as Bitcoin or Nostr, and they figure out that there's a community supporting them, those guys are just genius, and they can affect great changes, right, Ronnie?
Yeah, we actually have that right now within our network, whereby we have literally come across developers who, one in particular, as I may have mentioned to you in the past few days, Jack, who came to us and says, I've been waiting for you guys for the last 10 years. And this is what happens when you harness and support an ecosystem of more than just creatives, but folks on the ground who can take decentralized and open source protocols and build technological bespoke solutions on top of that for the benefit of the ecosystem, beginning with their very own community.
Right. Thanks. I think this is going to close our conversation, our extremely rich and interesting conversation on this very broad theme. It was kind of ambitious, I guess, to have this conversation on circular economy and free cities. Somehow it worked out. At least I think we've really provided Bitcoiners and the rest of the audience with a relatively clear, in-depth, relatively exhaustive framework for understanding what this concept means. So Bitcoiners are better equipped now to explain what they're doing, what they're not doing, to what extent this is a Bitcoiner's circular, whether this is a circular economy or not. With Scott, we even have got access to some assessment criteria measuring our progression in a scale of Bitcoiner circular economy. We've also have attempted to demonstrate that Bitcoin will have a massive influence in promoting more circularity in the economy in the broader sense of the term, systemically and in different sector of activities. And we've just realized the importance of technological evolution, those shifts of paradigm, this evolution from the industrial age to the informational age. We're stuck into it. We don't see the change of water, but it's happening, and it's just normal that the existing institutional structures and governance structures are being challenged just because they're not necessarily fit anymore to the conditions that have changed, and they're changing so rapidly. It's becoming a little bit of a panic now at the moment. So let's consider that we've finished for today with this conversation, and we have a very fun segment that's going to make the transition between this thematic conversation and the peer-to-peer learning segment. It's hands-on monetary economy, and we're talking about local currency, and we're bringing David Saint-Onge on board. Welcome, David.
Hey, Jacques. Thanks for having me.
What are you going to be? Why have you chosen this topic today, local currency?
Well, I'm going to cite one of the person who spoke earlier today, Quentin. He said something like the goal of his project is for more sovereignty at the local level. And if we think of free cities, circular economies, or Citadel, we all realize that often it emerged from a desire for more sovereignty. We can definitely say the same thing about the motivation behind some local currencies, the creation of some local currencies, but not always. And that's what we're gonna discuss in the next segment. And we're gonna use my very extensive monetary artifact collection to prove the point that local currencies can be a grassroots can emerge from grassroots elements, but it can also emerge from authority. And the point I'm making, I think, there is that money has always been local up until the time that monopolies emerge. That's the point of the whole segment.
Thanks, David. Without further delay, let's play this video. It's really exciting.
Hello everyone, I'm David Saint-Onge. I'm the author of the book Bitcoin, Everything You Need to Know. And today I'm pleased to welcome you to this first edition of this new segment, hands-on on monetary education, where any subject is a great pretext to take a look at some fascinating monetary artifacts from my very own collection. Today, we're going to explore various local currencies that were used throughout history, each created for very different reasons. Today we're gonna cover three main subjects. First, we're gonna explore why money has historically been local in the first place. Then we'll delve in some local currencies that were created by some authorities, as well as other that emerged from grassroots initiatives. Finally, we'll examine the reason behind the emergence of these local currencies. So a very quick slide about money always have been local. Because when we think about local currencies or local money, we often think it's some kind of local money created by local people for local needs. But in fact, the very first version, the very first iteration of money was could not be more local because it implied trust between parties of some contracts written on clay, on those little clay tablets, Sumerian tablet. Those were contracts that could create credit, so create money to credit creation, and those contracts were between two people that had to trust each other. It cannot be more local. And then you had the pre-coinage, so the proto coinage, which is all those little coin you see there, and they still needed some level of trust, and it was trust on some local, very local authorities, those city-states that were stamping them, and the people of the region had to trust this local authority with the weight and the purity of the metal of those coins. So it was during antiquity it was unrare for coin to be restamped by all those local authorities, because the money was actually the silver or the gold in the coin. That was the real unit. There is the real money there. But for convenience, they were stamped, and when they were stamped, you didn't need to weight them or test the purity because you were trusting the local authority. So those coins were totally local money because it was reserved for the people of the region who were trusting those local authorities. And then came the empires. So we can think of, let's say, Alexander the Great, who came and conquered the whole region and was able to impose the Attic standard, and then we could think of some sort of international standard for money, like an international reserve currency, and then we could like think of some local money and some international currencies. It's when the empire came and were able to impose some sort of international standard. The Roman did the same thing after, and we have all the history of those reserve currency, international or world reserve currency after. But in the very first part of history of money, currencies were indeed local. And I can add one last note, that Egypt is an example of a vassal state, so a state that was dominated by another nation state, which were the Greek or the Romans, and they were able to keep their own closed monetary system. And I'm going to show you the coin I'm talking about in the next slide. All right, enough talking. Here's the fun part. We're going to finally have a look at some monetary artifacts from my own collection. Here we go. This is the collection cam right here. So here's the collection. We're going to first have a look at some local currencies that were created by some authorities, and we're gonna start from the city level with the example of the Egyptian drachma that we just talked about, that were created more at the city level in Alexandria. It was called some civic coinage. It was also called some provincial coinage in Romanton, and then we're gonna go up right to the Maravédi that were created by the nation states for local use. So, as I said, this is tetradrachm from Egypt, and it was Egypt own closed. Yep, there you go. Their own closed monetary system, and it was created for probably for some identity assertion, and basically for protectionism, because they had some advantage and inconvenient, but some advantage of using a closed monetary system. Second local currency I want to talk about are not Geld, which in German literally mean not money, but it's emergency money, basically, that were created in the 1920s by France. Right here, it was issued by Chamber of Commerce of Lyon in France, and here one from Germany. From city of Edzeo. So those cities were or some companies or chamber of commerce in each cities were creating their own money to alleviate money shortage. So in the 1920s, there were a lot of inflation and even hyperinflation in Germany. So the whole monetary mass was not worth enough for the economy. So those local institutions had to create some alternative currency, some local currencies to alleviate the currency shortage. So that's another example of local currency made to the city level. Then we can move to the bocade. So the bocade is from Argentina. So bocade it's for bono de cancelación de deuda. So bocade. So it's like a coupon to cancel debt, basically. So it's issued by the province of Tucumán, and again, it's for basically in this case it's a tactic. Well, it's to finance the province finance first when there's shortage of money, and also it's a way to funnel the inflation to the population. So basically, the province is able to create more money and to finance their expenses, and they will basically funnel the inflation to the population. It's the same thing with the Maravédi. We'll see just in a moment. So those are all basically the one we saw now were local currency that were created by institution. So we had the city level, we have the provincial level, and then we have the the state level in Spain during the Age of Discovery. So they were importing all this new precious metal from the Americas, and they had the world reserve currency at the time, who was the Spanish dollar, and this is 2 real right there. And a Spanish dollar is 8 real, so this is 2 real. This currency was used by merchants and for international trades and by rich people. But the people of Spain were using the Maravédi, who was at first a real silver coin, but in the end it was just a copper coin like this, a base metal coin. And I'm not sure if you can see it right here, but there's a 8. Number 8 stamped right there. So basically what they did is they were restamping new denomination on coin to inflate the supply. So it was a local currency created by the state, but only used by the local population of Spain, and that could not be exchanged outside of Spain. And basically the government, instead of depreciating the Spanish dollar, devaluating the Spanish dollar by putting more base metal or removing silver from it. They were just restamping those base coin to funnel the inflation to their population. So those were 4 examples of local currencies that were issued by some authorities. Now we have 2 examples of grassroots initiatives, and the first one is very interesting. It's from a remote region in Mexico. It's called a tumen, and those are I just printed those myself, but normally they're like they look like some credit cards, paper credit card size paper, and basically they're using in their local economy. It's the indigenous people there that mostly that use it, and it's a way of asserting their identity, and also it's some form of protectionism to have more circular economy. So the money they spend when they buy products, they buy some fruits. If they buy it from the local producer, the money will stay inside the region. But if they buy it from someone from Mexico, from the big city, well, the money will go to the big city, some sort of protection. It is a grassroots movement initiative that created it. But my real question, my main question here, the problem I could see is who owns a printer, because they're very crude. I mean, anybody could like order some sort of copy from someone who can print them. So I would be really interested in knowing how they control the printer. And so it let me segue to my last example. It's called the demi, which mean half in English. In French, demi in French is half in English, and it's used in an eastern region of Quebec in Canada, called Gaspésie. And basically, what they do is, instead of printing those little coupons by themselves, they basically use the local fiat currency from the government of Canada, and they cut it in half. So I'm going to do it with some dirty fiat I own a lot of. So I will use those scissors and I will cut it in half. So when you do that, well, the money cannot get out of the region, because the only place where it's worth its price is in the region that accept demi. So if it's a $2 here, well, this half is worth $1 and this other half is worth $1. But you cannot go anywhere else in another, let's say another region, and spend half of the bill and receive half of its value. It's only in the region who accept the demi. So again, it's a way to do protectionism and having a circular, so the money will stay. If they do that, if they cut it and use it, well, they are sure that this money will not go out of the region and stay in Gaspésie. So yeah, so that's about it. That's what I wanted to show you with the collection camp. All right, very quickly, to conclude this presentation, is a short summary of the reasons why local currencies are created. As a reaction to monopoly of money, we have the tumen and bocade as examples. Protectionism, again, the tumen, the demi, and the Egyptian drachma were examples. Identity assertion, like civic coinage in antiquity, the tumen again, as a tactic to funnel inflation to the population, like we saw with the maravedì and the bocade, and to alleviate some currency shortage, as exemplified by not-Celt examples. All right. That's it for me today. Now back to the live stream with Jacques and the rest of today's episode. Thank you.
David, it's always fun for me to watch you, listen to you, especially when I remember your history. I mean, you fell in the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and then you totally discover this world of money and currency. And now that's really what's driving your passion. It's not so much Bitcoin as the history of the evolution of money and the importance of understanding it. to really promote sound money that serves the people, right?
Yes, exactly. I'm all I'm reading right now is about money history, and it's amazed me that all those artifacts that I collected compulsively, like on eBay, like I see a bill that I've never seen, studied a bit, and put it in my collection, and then months later or years later, literally, I find a use for it, for an article or for a broadcast like this. So it's always cool for me to be able to present those artifacts, because they just sleep in some binder somewhere.
Yeah, don't worry.
So
next time you come, we'll look into I'm particularly interested in the clay. I've seen your Sumerian clay tablet. It's like several thousands of years. I want you to present us this artifact next time.
Of course.
I think this drives us to our next segment, an important segment. It's the second part of the program of the roundtable, which really is about sharing good practices, learning from the mistakes, having hard talk, strong discussion where we agree to disagree on different perspectives within the Bitcoiners community. And in this case, we're going to be talking about an experience of Bitcoin adoption and community participation in Merida, Yucatan, Mexico. And just to make the transition, we're gonna have I'm gonna show you a small video. It's like 3 minutes, and it describes this tumin, this local currency you've referred to, you've showed us, you've printed yourself, you counterfeiter. And you're wondering where the printers stay as well.
That's the question here. Where
the documentary doesn't say it, but I'll just present this small video as a transition, and then we talk with Daniel and Mercedes.
All right, thank you, Jacques.
So is it coming? Yeah.
The Huasteca heartlands of Mexico's Veracruz state. In Papantla, the regional capital, David Barnabe is spending his afternoon in the central square.
Hola, buenas tardes. ¿Me vende un raspado?
Claro que sí, amigo.
De vainilla, por favor.
Serían 20 pesos.
Ok. ¿Acepta Tumin?
Claro que sí, amigo. Usted me daría 15 pesos en efectivo y 5 pesos de Tumi.
This was a transaction conducted in part in an alternative currency circulating in this region.
O sea, de cuenta que es en efectivo esto. Así lo manejamos. Sí, con eso vamos a hacer una compra al compañero y nos paga también en efectivo para que también podamos invertir, pero también nos da un Tumi, por ejemplo, y compramos así.
Todos los días desde el 2010 que inició esta moneda alternativa, y pues varios negocios de aquí de la zona se han integrado con esta moneda. Al principio no creíamos, veíamos que solo eran unas estampitas, pero sin duda es de gran valor porque esta moneda se da a conocer nuestra cultura.
Bueno, en el Tumin es una iniciativa comunitaria en la que intentamos y promovemos una moneda social con la que se intenta construir otras formas de economía social y solidaria aquí en la región. El Tumin funciona como un instrumento de intercambio a la hora de que se intercambian productos o se adquieren algunos productos principalmente de primera necesidad.
Physically, Tumin are little more than illustrated cards, but its monetary value comes from the principle that its local-only circulation retains value within the community that uses it. Lucio is on his way for an afternoon snack. He wants to eat mango, a fruit produced in this region. If he goes to a traditional supermarket and pays in Mexican pesos, the money he pays will leave Veracruz for Mexico City, where the business's financial headquarters is based. Lucio has his mango, but his money has left the regional economy. But by getting his mango from a local seller and paying for it in Tumin, a currency only accepted locally, those profits can only be spent in this region. Tumin's value to those who use it comes from the social solidarity and traditions it represents. And as long as everyone uses it agrees that these little coloured cards have a value greater than the paper they are printed on, Tumin is money. But it hasn't been without its problems. As well as convincing the local population to use the alternative currency, it has faced opposition from the federal government. In 2011, the Mexican Central Bank sued the founders of Tumin.
Entonces acudimos al llamado, dimos los elementos necesarios y suficientes para demostrar que la solidaridad no es un delito, que la solidaridad es un principio ético y filosófico de los pueblos originarios. Entonces hasta ahorita la solidaridad no está penada, entonces creemos que por esa razón el Banco de México, quien puso la demanda, no encontró elementos para demostrar la acusación que en ese entonces se hacía.
With the victory in court, Tumin's microeconomy expanded and today circulates in rural Veracruz as an alternative currency alongside the Mexican peso.
Hi, Jacques. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Hey, hello, Daniel. How are you?
How are you?
So Daniel is joining us from Mexico, from Mérida, Yucatan. Thank you so much for joining the roundtable. I have to say that I have actually discovered you through your mom, Mercedes, in a podcast by John Vallis, with John Vallis, fabulous podcast, fabulous interview, where I discovered the work of your mom, who used to be a development worker, a high-level public health specialist, specialized in women health, and I mean, she
Marxist, right?
And Marxist in her early days. And finally, through your intervention and I guess long discussion, she finally realized the value of Bitcoin. And the two of you decide to give much of your life energy to develop some project with the community in Mérida. Can you give us a brief overview of this project before we let your mom describe part of it through a video?
Sure. I mean, it's quite extensive by necessity. So we've gone kind of been unraveling and pulling the string out of everything that the project should encompass, because originally we were relocating back from Europe after living most of our lives abroad. And then, as most people that enter this world of kind of citadels and self-sufficiency, we're initially doing it out of fear, right? We're running away from all of these horrible changes in the world, and we're hoping to instill a new vision. But then that brings a completely different type of responsibility, and there are many approaches to do that. So what we've been building in Mexico, I can say, has been developing out of the necessity. It's almost like a selfish approach, in the sense that we can try and build these new models, but if we don't involve the community, we'll never get there in the end, right? That's become crystal clear with all of our experiences throughout the world and in development and in other countries, that it's a key part of what we're trying to do, right? So we really view it as part of, it's really bringing value to the community. That's the only thing we can hope to build. So that's, you and I obviously have had plenty of discussions on kind of the current status in the Bitcoin community and how they see the introduction of Bitcoin into the actual communities. And that's obviously, that's a very long conversation, because it's a very nuanced approach that needs to encompass so much, to the point where we consider we're in our research stage, right? We don't have recommendations. We don't know what we're doing, in the sense that we're just engaging with the communities. We're trying to provide like a very broad support, which we will. So I'll explain very briefly. So because we're trying to be self-sufficient in the middle of the jungle, the only way for us to guarantee what our goal is if the community, if the adjacent community is self-sufficient as well. So we strategically had to pick a point in the Yucatan where there is already a lot of work that's been done before us. And we're really trying to bring the financial education and the value and the benefits of Bitcoin in exchange for all of their local knowledge and everything that they're able to do. So from their end, for instance, their hands are tied in terms of their access to international markets, like the quality of the things they produce. So we've had to provide quite a broad approach in terms of making investments ourselves, setting up like a cultural house / shop front in the capital, in the city of Merida, where we'll be able to to showcase a lot of their products to the broader international Bitcoin community, and then vice versa. Like it's the only way to do things, right? So that's the way we're providing value to them, and they will provide the value of all their local knowledge. And listening to us and really starting from square one in terms of what this new technology can bring.
Yeah, that's it. We Bitcoiners discover Bitcoin and build the conviction that this is a solution, this is hope, this is something that can help restore some sort of stability in a world that is really in turmoil, and the crisis that we are seeing one after the others are at least partly the results of a defective monetary order, which is being highly challenged at the moment. So we have this conviction, we embrace it with much enthusiasm, and the difficulty is that okay, it needs to grow. It needs to grow if we want to make it happen. So, and we believe that it can benefit the people. And here there's the risk, and we've discussed it many times, that we fall in the same trap as all good doers who are well-intentioned people who are pretty sure that they're bringing the good gospel. You know, that I've been in this work of development, and we are basically skilled people, well-intentioned people trying to do their best. There's a lot of mistakes that have been made in the past decades in development and that are still being made. And we Bitcoiners, sometimes we are a bit arrogant and we believe that we understand it all because Bitcoin is such a complex tool requiring multidisciplinary learning that we know everything about everything. So we come with this arrogance and this enthusiasm, and we believe that we're going to bring Bitcoin adoption in a minute without really considering people's reality. And sometimes we hit a wall, and it's better that we have this conversation first. I'm going to play this excerpt from a great video that you've produced that is available on YouTube. And in this small excerpt, we discover your mom. She couldn't make it today, but she'll be with us in next episodes. Have a look at this wonderful excerpt that will allow us to understand the perspective that women can have on an opportunity such as Bitcoin.
Una preguntita, ¿usted ha pensado en mandar la miel a otras partes del mundo?
Me gustaría, porque la verdad, esta miel es miel que dan muy poquita las abejitas, y esta miel medicinal. Me gustaría también que llegaran a saber, a probar de mi miel hasta en lugares lejanos. Yo creo que con esto que ustedes están haciendo, creo que nosotros nos van a ver hasta allá muy lejos, y así van conociendo las propiedades de la miel de melipona, y gracias a eso estamos conociendo varias personas.
My name is Mercedes, and I was born in Mexico City, but I have been the last almost 40 years, I've been working throughout the world in over 50 countries, in different regions like African region, Southeast Asia, Latin America, of course. And all the work was related to women's lives. And my area of work is health. So I was mainly involved in protecting and promoting women's health. They are the foundation of the family, and if they are not healthy, the family can collapse. The impact of a woman being ill or dying for the family is huge, especially in the population I was working. It was only the most vulnerable population. Women were raised to protect other people's life. Biologically, we're designed to protect the children. So that means that in the health services, you can see women arrive at a very late stage because they don't know how to take care of themselves. Women tend to change even their lifestyle, like diabetes. When the women have to support the husband because he has diabetes, she's very concerned about changing the whole diet of the family, hers included. I grew up as a little child in the rural Mexico in the Nahuatl culture. I, as a child, was going to the market without money because my grandmother could exchange eggs for something, for instance, calc for preparing the tortillas when boiling the corn. So all the childhood that I had, it was money was absent. I never saw money. It's very recently that as a society, we are encountering this being mediated by the financial world to get what we need for subsistence. Having said that, the complexity of the economy became such that all the indigenous community are left marginal to the benefit of being financially illiterate. And having said that, women are also very industrious. Here in Yucatan, women are the ones who are supporting their families. If you go and see statistics, again, all throughout Latin America, you will see that female-headed households are increasing, that single mothers are increasing. We don't have the luxury as in Scandinavia, because women in Scandinavia were telling me, oh yeah, but we have a lot of single mothers. Yeah, but the state is the provider. And even you are paid by the number of children that you are having. Latin America is you and your faith, and your children will suffer the consequences of you being a single mother. Single mothers have the problem that have double or triple shifts. They have their formal work, and also they have to find a way to cover all the expenses of their children, their education on their own, and they have to arrive after working hard and cleaning their house and prepare food and blah, blah, blah. So there's no time for leisure, non-existing time for leisure, rest, so those women are faced constantly with a workload. Different workload, but they don't have the freedom like women in the northern countries to have leisure or to relax. So then these statistics are increasing despite all this technological boom. The vulnerable women don't benefit from that because they produce things that are valuable commodities that are sellable, but they don't get the benefit of the fiat money. And on top of that, they suffer all what we are familiar with fiat money suffers. That, for instance, inflation. Yes, they know because they go to the market to buy their things for the food to be prepared at home, and they can see that the same kilo of beans, the same kilo of rice, the same kilo of whatever they want to buy, corn, has constantly increased the price. And that means that the concept of inflation is very clear to them. They might don't know the term, but they know what it is about. They are familiar with the economic jargon, I would say in indirect way. They have to practice opportunity costs. Why? Because they have to choose between what they are going to buy because the money is scarce, and they have to think previously if they buy one item or other. That doesn't mean they recognize the term opportunity cost, but they are very familiar with all the economic dynamics that we have. And within these changes, what I noticed within the technological advancement, this opportunity with Bitcoin of bringing women to this new way of perceiving money, new way of using money. They have a frame where they can grasp what is Bitcoin.
Daniel, wonderful, wonderful video, really. And that's a video that's been filmed how long ago? Was it 2 years ago, 1 year and a half ago?
I think it's about a year ago, but so mainly I think the story, because I think you hit the nail on the head before you played the video on what you were discussing about kind of I guess the stage that we're at, right, in terms of Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin education, and the hubris and the excitement that's there. And I think when you and I, talk about like the problems we see in terms of really, I think we're at a crossroads now as Bitcoiners, right, in terms of the next stage of evolution for what we can actually do, because it would be absurd if we were to make all the same mistakes that have been made in development already, like you're saying, all the big donors, because the intentions are noble, right? But it's like there's some very, very clear lessons. So for instance, my mom was giving an example before, I think in the John Vallis interview, whereby like they would go through 5 years of research before rolling out an initiative, right? Whereas as Bitcoiners right now, we just want to show numbers. We want to show orange pilled heads that you can count. And for us, what we've seen is that it's such a delicate thing, because especially in the global south, right, people are living on the edge. So it's a very, I consider it highly irresponsible that you just come up to someone and you promise all of the benefits of Bitcoin without, because it's not even ill-intended, but it's like, if you don't speak the language, you're not able to provide a message that highlights the dangers and the subtleties that we saw this a lot in El Salvador, right? Like that the people weren't educated to the point where what they needed to know, and everybody was just caught in the excitement of the last bull market. They all went in at the top and lost their savings, right? So we really think that that's something that's very overlooked in terms of, because I understand, right? I understand that we want to show progress. We want to show people, we want to film people accepting sats and reports. So for instance, I'd say like we can't even call ourselves a circular economy, right? It's a very long-term project. We have the main capital in Merida, where we're establishing, like, say, the cultural center / embassy, and then the actual town that's already a highly productive town, because you can't just go willy-nilly and trying to introduce Bitcoin. Well, I mean, you can, right? But this is what this is the message we're trying to this is the debate and the what we want to start discussing. Should we, right? Because we, as Bitcoiners, we are at a disadvantage. We don't have the resources of the state, and we need to be strategic about where we focus adoption, right? There has to be a strategic connection with why that plays and why it justifies all of our time and energy, right? Because from what we see is like we all agree that Bitcoin is the most valuable element that we know yet. So at the moment, so for instance, it's artificial the way we're creating that demand, right? Because it's almost like Bitcoin Disneyland. Everyone wants to go and spend some sats and show some Instagram photos that sats are being accepted there. But we always try to highlight the difference between acceptance and adoption, right? So acceptance is very easy. So because, especially in the global South, we're very good at telling foreigners what they want here, right? If we can make a quick buck on it, of course, we'll dance to the tune and do the whole thing. But at the end of the day, we don't know what we're being left with. So we identified that as a big pitfall that people can fall into. And we want actual adoption, right? And that takes a lot longer than we expected, because it it involves establishing genuine connections with the people before you start to talk about anything financial, right?
And
so we need to go ahead.
What comes to mind is that most Bitcoiners kind of, pride themselves for being integrous, or at least much more integrous than they used to be, or at least integrity is a value that's cherished within the community. And most Bitcoiners, before, through their journey, the journey that's taken them to recognize Bitcoin as the most valuable crypto project at the moment. In this journey, they've visited the crypto casino, and they've experienced this excitation and this, this greed and all those emotions that won't really lead you very far. And we've sort of wisely, that's what we believe. We may be wrong, but we're convinced that we're right. We've convinced ourselves that this is just money. This is really a strong project, and we want to be super integrous. Now, what's happening is that we are over enthusiastic about sharing the good news to the world, and at the moment of indeed, I guess, engaging in such adoption project, we forget about all the difficulty it took us to come up to that realization. It's a lot of education. For most of us, it's hundreds, if not thousands of hours before we settle to the idea that, okay, just relax, be patient, save in Bitcoin, accept the volatility. And if you cannot, just don't go. So how do you, what's been your experience in terms of accepting that maybe your initial approach was not appropriate for the circumstance of the people, and what appears to be a more reasonable path forward to basically get them by small doable steps to learn and adopt Bitcoin?
So at the moment, so we've had to pivot in a way, and we are quite fortunate that we have, we've created a strong partnership with IBEX, which is a big technological provider to the space, and they understand the same vision, right? So, for instance, we're trying to provide the tangible benefits of Bitcoin as a payment rails technology. So we're offboarding them. Well, we haven't started, but I'm saying this is all getting set up in the background. So we maybe have a handful of people that want to join the pilot program, and we'll start accepting Bitcoin like that. But for the most part, they're going to be being off-ramped into pesos immediately, right? So we're looking at maybe 1 or 2 years of just promoting Bitcoin as a payment technology that is obviously better than the current system, with better fees than credit card companies. And then we will focus on, like I was mentioning before, on seeing the quality of the products and produce that these communities are manufacturing and making, and seeing if they're on a par to be able to bring them into the competing in the big city and competing at an international stage. So at the moment, we're super careful in terms of selling like the future benefits of Bitcoin because, for instance, we do run into this problem that sometimes other foreigners come and they just want to orange peel someone. They want to put an accepted Bitcoin sticker on the premise, and it's triple the amount of work for us, because then we have to go back to the person, see if they understood anything, see if they really know what they're getting themselves into, see if they know the dangers and how that can actually impact their business. And for the most part, like, you find out that it's a very like superficial introduction that's been received, and they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. So we really see, and obviously by word of mouth. So if we do our job and really onboard a handful of people, but that really get it, right, where we've spent the time really getting them to know, and they've seen so for instance, we've never pushed anyone into accepting Bitcoin. We've been mainly supporting their business, tipping in Bitcoin, and then naturally over a period of almost over a year, during the last pump, one of the guys is like, whoa, look at all these tips. Like, that's a significant amount. So for the first time, he himself said, like, oh, can you actually pay me in Bitcoin this time? But it's a hand-holding, very slow process that has to come from them. And even then, like, we wouldn't feel comfortable constantly, because then we've had the drop again, right? So maybe he took that payment at the top, and now it's dropped another 10%. So it's just like a genuine human interaction of, as we're discovering this new technology, but really like sharing the reality of it. That's really what's key, right? Because even as Bitcoiners, we like to hodl through the dips and all of that, but it requires psychologically like a very, very specific frame of mind, that if you don't convey that.
Perhaps that's useful to clarify a little bit for the non-Bitcoiner audience, that Bitcoin is not only an asset, it's not only a denomination, an asset, a currency, if you will, that you can hold, that you can self-custody. It's also a network. And so what you were referring to, and basically holding the assets, saving your value, your money, your wealth in Bitcoin, entails some challenges, because the volatility of the thing is such that that it's going to be extremely stressful to see both a massive appreciation of the wealth you've put in Bitcoin, and then a sudden decline, super abrupt, and it's going to take a cycle or two, and Bitcoin cycles are 4 years long. It's going to take a cycle or two before you start relaxing about it. And as you say, it's psychologically demanding. But you can also use Bitcoin, not the asset, but the network, which is, as you called it, a rail of payment, which is just an alternative to the SWIFT, the SEPA, the whatever networks with many intermediaries that we're using so far to make a transfer payment, right? And
I mean, on that front already, there's huge benefits that we could be selling to people.
And in this case, you're not sending Bitcoin. You can send a peso through the Bitcoin rail,
exactly,
and with very little fee, instantaneous, and it's happening already with Strike. And so the thing you're talking about involving IBEX is going to be a solution comparable to that of Strike, isn't it?
Yes. So for instance, for us, we're really focusing on like the very tangible things, say for expats or even for remittances, which are they're huge markets, but they're very slow, because the the learning curve is significant, right? Even though people know it's something completely new, but once we start to get the message out that you can save a lot of money, so then there's so many little different avenues. So for instance, expats, there's a lot of expats living in Mexico, and especially in this part of Mexico. So we're banking on them being like, part of, so we can't call it a circular economy because it will require external injection of cash for like probably a good number of years. But at least we're not focusing on donations, because when you're really looking for donations for your project, then that puts you in a completely in a much more vulnerable spot in terms of being able to be something that sustains itself. But at least there's a very genuine need of expats to lower their fees between what they're getting charged on the exchange rate versus in addition to the ATM fees and all of those things that add up. And then on this side, the credit card companies are charging them, like almost double what we'd be able to do. So we're able to save money on both sides of that, those transactions. So already that for Mexico in general it's a pretty big incentive for people to start looking at a new technology very seriously. The other thing I wanted to say is that, when I speak of being strategic as Bitcoiners, what we identified is there's already an existing network of tourist towns called magical towns, pueblos mágicos, in the whole of Mexico, and it's a very successful tourist initiative. So when we started looking at where are we going to try and establish a Bitcoin pilot program, why don't we tap into this existing network? Because if we are successful in one of those towns, it's already a network that communicates within itself. It competes within itself. So we're hoping to leverage that natural, competition that exists within those towns, and that's why we say, like, let's be strategic Bitcoiners. It's like when we put out like an international call of action and say, come and support this, we'd like to present the whole reasoning as to why we're trying to get our foot in the door in this very specific locale with this very specific approach. So that's and this goes back. We've had lots of chats with Scott, which it's a good, because there is a need for that, right? Because like you're saying, every man and their dog is calling themselves Bitcoin circular economy. And it would be lovely if all of these things were genuine grassroots organic movements. It was going to spread like wildfire. But because we are against such a formidable enemy and we don't have endless resources, like we would need to, as a Bitcoin community internationally, go where will we get our most bang for our sats in terms of actual adoption, right? And that's I don't proclaim to have the answers, but that's a debate that we need to have. What does it mean to have actual adoption? Because that's a very different thing. Even in El Salvador, I went with the hope, right, to be inspired to that extent, and the reality is very different. And in terms of the actual population, what benefits is the population? Is it connected, right? So maybe you've graduated 1,000 people into your diplomas, but like going back to those people and seeing what they actually understood, where they stand with Bitcoin. Like this is all information that does not exist in the Bitcoin ecosystem, that somebody somewhere has to start collecting, because we need to start gauging the reality of where we are exactly, right? Because like we've said, I mean, it's so tempting for me. It's tempting to go and show a successful project based on Instagram reports and trinkets being exchanged, right? Yeah. But in terms of it, because you know how long it took for you to understand Bitcoin, right? I know how long it took for me. We can't expect these people that have much bigger economic challenges to get it much quicker, right? So that's really what I can't highlight it enough in terms of the entire Bitcoin community, right? Because even the products that are out there, like to this day, there is no Bitcoin wallet that I can put to use in the communities where we're going, right? I have all the talks with all the different developers, and And we can eventually create something, but I think it says a lot, right? That no one has actually gone, sat down, done the interviews, done like with both, with the people promoting it and the people, the new users, the new potential users. So
yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward. I think we're soon going to wrap up and conclude this long episode. But I'm really looking forward to seeing this second segment of the program, this peer-to-peer learning space, to allow for these kinds of conversation where we say what's happening in the real life. We have this truthful conversation about the challenges and sometimes the excessive ambition that we come with, and our difficulty to recognize early enough that we are on the wrong path. My experience in development is that changing behavior takes a long time. Introducing toilets, improve sanitation system, improve water supply system. You would imagine that it's easy. It's very difficult. Some stuff gets adopted very quickly. I mean, the mobile wave has been a fantastic. It's some stuff get adopted very, very rapidly. In the case of Bitcoin, it might take longer, as you say, and I think it requires identifying within a community a few people, a strong nucleus, a core group of people who are both highly dedicated, knowledgeable, and who have a strong influence, opinion leaders, etc., and who basically commit to help the community learn at their own rate, right? Some communities are not going to be mature. They're not ready for it. Some villages may be known for being a bit more avant-gardist and embracing new things earlier than others. Well, then maybe you have to start there. But trying to roll out a whole program in a whole province in a very systematic and standardized way, even if you have a strong marketing budget, is not going to work necessarily with Bitcoin, I think. So, I mean, do you want to add something before we?
I mean, just on that on the last bit you said, I think so. It would help for Bitcoiners to sort of really identify the elements of Bitcoin that right now sell themselves, right? So we've identified with IBEX that just saving businesses on commission, saving expats on those things. Those things I think can be adopted very, very quickly. Right. And then we're just going to focus solely on that. Right. Even though as Bitcoiners, we would have the ambition to go the full thing and just end the whole fiat scam and get everybody on Bitcoin. But I think there's something very pragmatic and practical to, as a community, like really going, like where are we going to focus on? Is it going to be in the global south? It's almost like, specialize a little bit as a community, because we need all the support we can get. But we also need our message to be broadcast in the correct, objective way.
Exactly. I mean, I think we're under the pressure of ensuring that Bitcoin succeed in a way that maintains it's decentralized enough to withstand the threats of nation states and otherwise. But at the same time, it's not achievable to do this, to get everybody to run their full node and coin-join their transaction and stuff like that. And what's important is that we move them quickly in this, get them to follow the right direction first, get them in the process and gradually learn. And I guess the education efforts of all the people doing some educations are participating to this hope that we can onboard people, and then year after year they regain more and more of their sovereignty in this system, which allows for a journey in this respect, right?
Mm-hmm. So just to wrap up, sorry, Jacques. So I think as Bitcoiners, like we're really against like credentials and all of these things, but I think in this particular case, especially in the global south, there are people like yourself or like my mom that have genuine experience, like in the field, in specific countries that would be invaluable to many Bitcoin companies or many Bitcoin projects. And they don't see it's one of those you don't know what you don't know situations, right? And people, that's what I think these roundtables like can bring a lot of that experience to the forefront, so that at least people know that that how far away they are from the price or the correct assessment of the situation, right? That's what I would hope like that we see a lot more in these roundtables, like people with actual experience in the field for very tangible things that we need to accomplish in the Bitcoin community, and that it can be, you know, that it can be listened to with humility and with just pragmatism. Like, let's learn from these people that have already done this in different areas. They've already rolled out successful initiatives, you know, in developing countries, and where are blind spots as a Bitcoin community. And that alone, I think, will save us like decades of evolution in the Bitcoin space. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Jack.
Daniel, thanks a lot. I mean, it's great to conclude this first episode with you, because it's through our conversation that I really decided to push it and try to make this project happen. I'm sure we're gonna have you on stage again with your mom, and there's a lot to say about Bitcoin initiatives in Mexico. Thanks again for your participation. How can people follow your work? If there's a way, I'll probably.
So I didn't put it. If you put it, it's in a Citadel, INAH Citadel on Twitter. That's
Okay.
where like they can follow. See, I should have put it on the link.
Well, Daniel and everyone,
Perfect,
thank you so much for your participation in this first episode. It was a bit messy initially with all the logistic. I mean,
No, I think you did really well, Jacques, for you know, like for a first thing. It's commendable.
Yeah, and looking forward the next episode. I think we'll make sure we have some interesting themes, and that we bring a lot of Bitcoiners active in different initiatives in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe. Good evening, everyone, or good day wherever you roam, and see you later. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.